41. Chapter 40. One Musical Chairs. Arthur Weasley was concerned. The meeting of the Wizengamot were always a trial for him. Although the Weasleys were technically a pure-blood member of the Sacred 28, they had always been better breeders than gamblers, and his great-grandfather had gambled away most of the family fortune, and more to the point, revenue-generating assets, and divided up the little that was left among the many children. His grandfather had been heir to a house that couldn't pay its dues and saw its seat in the Wizengamot lost. His father had been a staunch Republican, a Muggle rights advocate, and all-around foe of the system, more or less in rebellion. Arthur had been raised in a poor household with hordes of untidy but happy children and a deeper magical knowledge than any of his economic class. The difference between peasant and impoverished gentry can be seen only if you care enough to look really hard, and none of the Weasleys did. His own affection for Muggles and more than usual skill with a wand got him a ministry job and saw him rise to head the least significant department in the ministry. As someone with no observed ambition, when it came time to pick someone to hold one of the 5 ministry seats, and no bargain between factions could be reached, the casual remark, "We could just give it to Weasley," was met with universal shrugs, and thus Arthur Weasley sat in one of the 5 ministry seats. A decade of being Arthur Weasley had meant many of the difficult but necessary jobs that fell to the ministry seats had fallen to Weasley, and the holders of the other seats began to recognize Arthur as the odd duck who took duty to the Wizengamot seriously, but felt rather embarrassed to sit in it. He had no drive to use his success at those hard and necessary tasks to advance his career, and thus working with him could advance their own. His became the safest of the 5 ministry seats, as whoever held the other 4 needed Arthur and his knowledge of how the work actually got done sitting in his seat. Arthur was a fixture of the Wizengamot, rather like a comfortable chair or favorite lamp. Useful, drew a smile when you passed it, but not something that warranted actual notice. Until today. "Merlin's beard, Arthur, didn't know you had it in you," Lord Ogden said, stopping to pump Arthur Weasley's hand. Arthur was left wondering what exactly that was all about when his face got slapped hard by the old crone and head of the Board of Education, Griselda Marchbanks. "How could you do that to Marley? I thought I knew you, Arthur Weasley," Griselda said, shaking her finger at him in rage. "Well, we always speculated you knew your way around a cauldron. I mean 6 sons followed by a witchborn, and not a squib among them. No wonder you always look tired. Any other secret children beyond today's?" "Come on, Arthur, you can tell," Lady Bones, head of the DMLE, said as she moved past Arthur to take her own ministry seat. Lord Tiberius Knott stopped in front of Arthur Weasley and smirked. "Just you keep that wand away from House Knott. I don't want any gingers popping up in the side branches. We pride ourselves on black hair. Although seems you really improved the breed a bit, took down Lucy for a treat your boy did." Arthur suddenly understood. That horrible rumor about his having an affair with Narcissa Malfoy. Fred and George had owled him about it, something about making sure he didn't get blindsided, but surely that mess had died down months ago. Arthur took a look at the session's agenda. Item 1, seeding of new members, award of Merlin presentations. Item 2, paternity suit, Narcissa Black vs Arthur Weasley re Lord Draco Malfoy. Item 3, Department of International Relations and Department of Sport presentation. Item 4, Loch Ness Monster environmental complaint, Muggle boat, noise disturbing nesting mothers in violation of Treaty of Loch Ness 1352. Entry into the Wizengamot chambers required careful security checks. No one who was not either a ring-bearing member of the House, an Auror in service to the Wizengamot, a clerk in service to the Wizengamot, or a witness escorted by duly appointed Aurors could enter the chamber. With Sirius Black at large, and Death Eater and Dementor attacks being on the rise, security was extra tight. Narcissa Black strode haughtily between 2 Aurors as she passed Arthur in his seat. He rose to look her in the eyes and offer his denial. "Lady Black, you know it isn't." That was as far as he got before she grabbed him by the collar and snogged him senseless. Arthur Weasley was a middle-aged man with 7 children, hardly a blushing virgin, but the days of him being pounced upon and snogged breathless when he came home from work were far in the past. Added to that, the witch doing the snogging was giving it her all, and Arthur was nothing if not an earthy sort of wizard. Rather, before the cat calls, whistles, and shouted demands for order could get his attention, his hand found themselves on the appropriate curves, and he was giving as good as he got. The Weasley wand was not after all to be ignored. But it wasn't all bad, was it? Lady Black said, and swayed over to the witness box to await the pleasure of the Wizengamot and its agenda. Arthur Weasley looked at the lords and ladies of the Wizengamot and saw humour, shock, horror, and from Lady Augusta Longbottom a most surprising sight. Howls of laughter and knee slapping that fitted the grand old lady about as well as a muggle biker jacket. He flushed scarlet and sank wordlessly into his seat. Marley was going to murder him. Worse, given their extensive gardens, he would be compost before he could possibly think of a rational explanation. Minister Fudge noticed the children to be awarded the Order of Merlin had been through careful blood identification rituals to make sure no one was smuggling in the renegade Sirius Black as one of the children, and gestured for Dumbledore as the chief warlock to call the session to order. Dumbledore hammered his gavel down and gave the order. This special session of the Wizengamot is called to order. All those not sworn to the chamber or on the agenda will now be removed. Dumbledore said, then checked the crystal ball before his seat, when it flashed the notice that all those without business had been excluded from the chamber. Smiling, he turned to Cornelius Fudge for him to begin his bit of political theatre. Let the children think they have won as they get their pretty medal and the puppet strings tied to it. Let them discover exactly how little power or control children had in the house of their elders. They were puppies and kittens, although when fully grown they might be dangerous, but in this place old age and trickery always won. Cornelius rose and began his speech. It was a good one. He didn't pull the minister for magic identification out of a chocolate frog box after all, and he was good at making speeches. And so it is that these children, the very hope of the future of wizarding Britain, did put themselves before their fellow students and the foe, and uphold the most ancient and sacred duty of this body, the defense of the future of wizard kind, without care for their own lives or cost of their actions. Such service would merit awards for the most highly trained and tested aura, but it was done by students on their way to begin their third year. Before that year was even half over, they would repeat such heroism a second time, joining together in a show of unity between all the houses of Hogwarts that has not been seen since the days of the founders, and together drove off the massed forces of the Dementors of Azkaban. There is a name we swear by when miracles happen in the wizarding world, and that name is Merlin. In his name, we have established 3 orders of merit for witches and wizards that choose to rise above the duty we ask of all, and offer a service we dare ask of none. The deeds of these children merit no less than the Order of Merlin First Class, and this I have been authorized by this sacred body to award them today. Pure blood, half-blood, muggle-born, of every Hogwarts house, of every faction of the Wizengamot, together you face danger to defend the children of wizarding Britain. Together may you take now your seats in this august body, and take your oaths of allegiance to the Wizengamot. Cornelius Fudge knew it was a good speech. The Wizengamot roared and applauded. Sure, it was political theatre, and everyone knew the actual power of the chamber would not shift for a paltry handful of new seats, not when the major ancient and noble houses held dozens each, and through vassals and allied controlled far more. Still, they were not made of stone. All had family on the Hogwarts Express or in the stands. Those who sat this house may be truly noble or truly selfish, but to each, the blood of their own house was more precious than gold, and these children had preserved it. Their cheers were legitimate. Let the cold business of realpolitik at least wait until item 2 on the agenda. Alas, it was not to be. Augusta Longbottom rose and raised her wand to claim right to speak. Point of order, seating of new lords in the Wizengamot is done by seniority. Lady Augusta Longbottom stated firmly. Minister Fudge looked perplexed. They were sworn in together. If there was an order of precedence, I don't think it was noted. But if you have any need for Heir Longbottom to be seated first, I'm sure we can accommodate. The seeming Lady Longbottom shook her head. 2 mistakes in that statement, Minister Fudge. First, it is not Heir Longbottom who has seniority and should be seated first, but me. The great lady then smiled with the wide white grin of a wolf, and her voice dropped an octave. "And I am not Lady Augusta Longbottom, but Lord Sirius Orion Black, and by right of seniority demand to be seated and sworn first." As she said that, she strode to the empty black seat and sat upon it. In a flash, the illusion of Augusta Longbottom vanished, and Sirius Black in formal robes sat in the seat. Arthur Weasley heard a familiar dry chuckle from Narcissa Black in the witness box, and turned to notice that seated in the box was the real Augusta Longbottom, wide smile upon her face. "Buck up, Arthur. Needed item 2 on the agenda to get an extra body in the door. The security spells ignore ring bearers, both lords and regents. But once our presence is noted, any lord or lady who is present but not seated and sworn gets automatically entered into the Book of Law and becomes an agenda item. The house can do no business until that item is finished. Besides, having heard the gossip from my daughter-in-law Alice from when Frank forgot her birthday back in 6th year, you were supposedly quite the talented fellow in a broom closet, so I had to test it out. I shall send Molly a few bottles of good wine and a draft note at Madame Malkin's for all your Sproggs robes next year. What with item 3, dress robes for your hoard, will set you out of pocket a bit. Least I can do for borrowing her husband." Lady Augusta chuckled as Arthur Weasley sat back in his ministry seat and tried to word his explanation to his wife. Failing utterly, he turned his attention to the events on the floor. Cornelius Fudge pointed to the auras. "Arrest that man." Amelia Bones, head of the DMLE, direct boss of the auras, and of course, briefed on the plan, was ready, and her sonorous charm filled the room. "Stand down." Inside the Wizigamot chamber, lords have qualified immunity unless tried and convicted before this body, and let me assure you, Lord Sirius Orion Black has never been tried or convicted. As it stands, his execution order is illegal, as was his imprisonment. Amelia Bones said coldly. Sirius Black already had his wand raised. "I, Sirius Orion Black, swear upon my magic that I was never the secret keeper for James and Lilly Potter." That Peter Pettigrew was the secret keeper for James and Lilly Potter. That I have always fought against Voldemort and his Death Eaters. That Peter Pettigrew was a sworn and marked Death Eater. That Peter Pettigrew betrayed the secret of James and Lilly Potter's location to Voldemort, causing their deaths. That I pursued Peter Pettigrew, only to see him fake his own death and cause an explosion that stunned me and killed a dozen muggles. That Peter Pettigrew lived in secret until his death this year, caught in the act of sexual deviancy with underage girls in Hogwarts and killed. Sirius' wand slashed down, and a pulse of magic swept through the room. Raising his wand, he spoke softly. Loomis, his wand glowed, showing magic had judged he spoke only truth. Amelia Bones then took back the floor and summoned Aura Moody, who just happened to be in her security detail, to provide testimony of Peter Pettigrew's being alive for the decade Sirius was in prison for his murder, for his being a marked Death Eater, and for his being killed caught in the act of unlawful sexual acts with underage witches in Hogwarts School, where he had concealed himself as the Weasley pet rat Scabbers. Cornelius Fudge was livid. This was a political disaster. He bought time by allowing the seeding of his Order of Merlin children. Surely he could salvage some political capsule out of this. Draco Malfoy stood and raised his wand. "As Lord Malfoy by right of challenge, and as I have taken my seat in the Wizigamot in my own name, I claim the right of head of house to pass judgment on a member of my house." Cornelius Fudge only knew of Narcissa Black, the woman who put Draco's paternity on the agenda, as the only other member of his house that Draco could be talking about. Surely, any undermining of House Black was to Cornelius' advantage at that point. "So noted. Let Lord Malfoy's family judgment be made and entered into the record," Cornelius said pompously. That slimy bitch had been part of this sham to humiliate him. Let her suffer whatever Lucius' poisonous little offspring had in store for her as punishment. House Malfoy passes judgment on Lucius Malfoy, former lord of this house, for the crime of line theft, in that Lucius Malfoy did attempt to steal the seat, the votes, the fortunes, and the inheritance of House Black in direct violation of the oaths of primacy in the marriage contract with Narcissa Black. For this crime, I cast Lucius Malfoy from the House of Malfoy, abjure and dissolve any alliances and oaths made in his name, call in any debts owed to House Malfoy that he had made. Turning to Sirius Black, Draco Malfoy bowed deeply. House Malfoy acknowledges its debt to House Black and offers its allegiance in repayment. Sirius Black rose and bowed more shallowly to his nephew. House Black accepts the apology and allegiance of House Malfoy. Your hands are between ours for protection and judgment. Your vassals are our vassals, and their protection and judgment are likewise ours. Cornelius Fudge blood ran cold. The dark faction just got gutted, but the control of it passed to Sirius Black, a man Cornelius had put in kiss on sight, order with the Dementors of Azkaban on rather than allow him trial. He was not going to be a friend. Albus Dumbledore smiled. It seems Cornelius' bit of political theatre was going well for him. He gave what the Muggles would call a golf clap and bowed ironically to the little puppet. So happy to be free of Lucius' control, he thought he could ignore Dumbledore as well. Now Dumbledore was the head of the strongest vote bloc left in a shattered Wizengamot. Old age and treachery always won. At that point, Harry Potter took his seat, then rose and held up his wand and a scroll. Point of order. As a seated member of the Wizengamot in my own right, and thus legal adult, I lay charges of usurpation and blood theft upon Albus Percival Wulfric Brian Dumbledore. Entered into evidence with this body, the copy of my parents will with Albus Percival Wulfric Brian Dumbledore's signature as witness. This will list my magical guardians upon my parents' death to be, in order, Frank and Alice Longbottom, Sirius Orion Black, Amelia Bones. This body will note Albus Dumbledore is not listed, yet he took possession of my wounded body from Sirius Black at the scene of my parents' brutal murder, and passed me with a life-threatening curse still raging in my body, on the steps of Muggle relatives. Had I not been taken and claimed by Griphook of the Goblin Nation due to a wise and thoughtful contract enacted by my mother in secret, I would have died, and Dumbledore would have continued to illegally cast the Potter votes in the Wizengamot, to which he was never entitled. Lord Sirius Orion Black was never convicted, still lived, and was of sound mind and body. Dumbledore chose to leave him illegally imprisoned while not providing me care, yet claiming rights to my regency as if legally given authority for my care. You will note that Amelia Bones, head of the DMLE, was alive and employed at this very ministry, and yet never even told she was next in line to be my guardian if Lord Black were not available. Lady Bones, were you advised you were on the list to be my guardian? Harry Potter asked. Lady Bones rose, and her voice cut through the clamour of the Wizengamot. I was not. Harry spoke again. Does this meet the particulars of the crime of usurpation? Lady Bones spoke again. It does. The vote took the better part of 3 hours. The crime of usurpation was negotiated down to interference with custody and fraud. Dumbledore was able to escape being stripped of seat and rank only by burning a lifetime of favours, but the fine would be damaging to his operations in ways the lords of great houses would understand. Politics at this level ran on bribes, and now he could barely limp. Harry Potter was not done, however, with that judgment in hand. Honourable members, since Albus Percival Wulfric Brian Dumbledore's assumption of regency has been declared invalid, all alliances, contracts, and oaths made in his name are thus repudiated by House Potter. All loans and debts owed to House Potter in that time are now called due. As I have claimed a seat in my own name as an Order of Merlin holder, I now hold the voice and vote for House Potter in my own hand and right. As a student of Hogwarts, I admit I will not be available for the day-to-day press of duties, and thus appoint as my steward he who should have been my magical guardian all the years of the usurpation. I appoint as my regent Sirius Orion Black. Harry bowed to Sirius deeply, and Sirius strode over and hugged him fiercely, the two of them laughing like they had just pulled off the most amazing prank in history. They then both turned towards Dumbledore and shook their heads, faces suddenly stone cold and serious. Old age had never felt so heavy, nor treachery so bitter. Somehow Cornelius' political theatre was less a comedy than tragedy. Still, Dumbledore smiled. They had no idea what a mistake they had just made. Barty Crouch was the Minister for International Cooperation now, but he had been head of the DMLE during the war and been the one to send Sirius to Azkaban without a trial. Now that was brought out into the open, his chances of finally winning the seat of Minister of Magic were non-existent. Non-existent as long as Harry Potter and Sirius Black had anything to say about it. Let them have their little victory. They abstained from the votes on the Triwizard Tournament because it didn't apply to them. After all, Harry was too young to participate. Barty Crouch had the mind of a political predator, one who knew the Triwizard Tournament's success was his best shot at the Minister of Magic's chair since Cornelius was politically gutted and Dumbledore neutered. He had access to Hogwarts for all of next year and Sirius Black as his only political obstacle. Dumbledore would not act against Potter or Black. He was champion of light after all, and the boy who lived must live to face Voldemort. No, Dumbledore would not let Harry die. Given magical healing abilities, letting him almost die was absolutely on Dumbledore's to-do list. Who knows what sort of magical intervention and controls might be necessary to keep the boy alive. The boy would be properly grateful. A Master Legiman's given access to a child whose defenses were broken by the brink of death would believe Dumbledore was a llama or unicorn if told to. Being told they loved and trusted Dumbledore before all others was relatively simple. It had worked for James after all. Sirius, on the other hand, Dumbledore would not save. He gave the boy a chance to live a long life in Azkaban. It was not Dumbledore's fault Sirius rejected his mercy. It was, after all, for the greater good. 43. Chapter 43, Family Matters. Sirius Orion Black was happy to be reunited with his godson Harry. Getting back to Harry had been the one thought keeping him sane through his long, lonely sojourn in Azkaban. The happiest day of his life was when Harry had welcomed him into his life. Every day since he had been more amazed, impressed, or terrified at how Harry had proven to be every inch the son of the first marauder, every bit as bold as James at his best. Now he wanted to strangle the little git. "You are my godfather. We are bound by blood and magic, by the love, blood, sweat, and tears shed together from Hogwarts through the Blood War," Harry had said, and Sirius grew as drunk on those words in a way neither whiskey nor the official pardon of the Wizengamot could equal. Drunk on that, he had sobered with the next line like a bucket of ice water after a 3-day bender. Harry was not done talking, and the next words were like whips. Narcissa sat and sipped tea poured by Harry's goblin mother, and the 2 goblin females had their teeth hidden in the smiles at the moment. "Draco is your nephew, son of your first cousin Narcissa Black, who has dissolved her marriage contract with the Death Eater Lucius No Name. As a full-blood daughter of the House of Black, she has returned to the clan with a son who has no male protector, no male guardian or guide. Her son is owed the guidance of the Lord of House Black, unless you think the only model a son of House Black should have is that ball-less Death Eater Lucius," Sirius snarled. "I will not have any hand in raising and training a son of Lucius Malfoy. He fought for Voldemort before, and the apple does not fall far from the tree." Harry snarled, and his hand slammed down onto the table, the runes in its edge flaring as they took an impact that should have shattered it. Frithweaver's smile grew toothy. A human son was about to educate Lord Black in the ways of the goblin clans. Narcissa Black ended her marriage, cut her ties to the most powerful politician in Wizarding Britain, and cut his balls off for the crime of endangering a son of the House of Black. Draco Malfoy fought his father wand to wand, defeated him, claimed the lordship of Malfoy, and cast Lucius, once Lord of Malfoy, from his own house. Lucius No Name has no lordship, gold, or balls. The political right hand of Voldemort has been cut by a son and daughter of House Black who ask only for their place and protection within their clan. What have you done? Threatened to cut them from the family tree. You are the son of Walburga Black who tried to cut you and Andromeda from the family. I guess the rot is set deep in House Black, and your apple didn't fall far from Walburga's tree. Harry sneered. Merlin's bloody balls. Sirius swore as he flinched from Harry's blazing green eyes. Griffith leaned over and poured some more whiskey into his glass. Sirius turned to Griphook. "It's not right hearing Lily's voice coming out of Harry's mouth. I feel like when she was tearing a strip off James and me for doing something she thought was wrong." That is the same bloody tone she used when you realized she pulled her wand while you were caught looking in those hell lamps she called eyes. Griphook smiled. I am Harry's father now because Lily Evans was smart enough to outwit a goblin in contract law, ruthless enough to wield her own death like a weapon, and powerful enough to defeat Voldemort at his peak when Dumbledore dared not. I find that he sounds just like her to be reassuring. Narcissa, you backed Voldemort when he rose. Why should I believe you changed? Sirius said, switching tacts and targets. Narcissa sipped her tea and smiled coldly. I saw Dumbledore stripping away everything that made us great. Ritual magic was not to be taught because it was dark. Archaeomancy and legilimency will not be taught because it could be abused. History of magic couldn't be outright cut, so he left it to be taught by a ghost because he knew that would stop any future generations from ever learning about where we came from and why our ancient traditions came to be. Every generation weaker than the last, every generation content to fade a little farther until what the Muggles eventually discover isn't even worth enslaving or even noticing when they wipe us out. The Dark Lord promised a return to the old ways, the ancient and eternal quest to master the magic that is our gift and our sacred charge. Narcissa said proudly. Sirius snarled. He was a lying genocidal twat who managed to kill more English wizards than Grindelwald's entire world war. The only one who was going to end up with any knowledge or power was him and his, and slavery is exactly the cost of being his. He fed you a line of pureblood supremacist bullshit, and you bought it. Narcissa sipped her tea. Yes, well, I tried it on and found it a poor fit. I returned it and took dear Lucius' testicles as repayment. You should know a lady always reserves the right to change her mind. Sirius shook his head and smiled coldly. You expect me to believe you would turn against your precious Dark Lord and his pureblood supremacist doctrines just because your fop of an ex-husband accidentally sacrificed your son to Voldemort. The air in the room went cold, and the ambient light drew back to pinpricks around the lamps as darkness gathered like a cloak, until all that could be seen was the pale face and cold silver eyes of Narcissa Black. I would burn the world to ash and dance on the corpses of everyone I have ever known if that is what it takes to make my son safe. I am a Black. Your precious Dumbledore has decided Harry is to die like a sacrificial lamb so he can play Lord of Light. Are you willing to betray your oaths to the Order of the Phoenix, to the Ministry as an Auror, and the Wizengamot as Lord Black to keep him safe? Narcissa hissed, her voice thick with power and rage. Sirius smiled, the wide white grin of the Grim whose form he took. Like the goblins in the room, his smile was all teeth and promised violence. I would burn the world and damn my soul with 1,000 broken oaths to keep him safe. I am a Black. Sirius said, his voice a thing of cold iron and far uglier ways to die. Frithweaver topped up Narcissa's tea, then took a sip of her own. This is the Goblin way. Blood and gold, hard work and harder fighting, but all of our magics, all of our laws, every coin and every drop of blood is to one end, to defend the clan. Family first, and let the rest of the world burn. Sirius walked over to Draco Malfoy, who had been sitting between Harry and Narcissa, putting on his best Slytherin social smile, and slammed a hand down onto his shoulder. Right then. Draco Malfoy, Lord Malfoy, I accept you and your mother Narcissa Black into the House Black. You have the protection of the house, and its lord. Your father was a piece of work, but my own mother leaves me no room to talk so welcome to House Black. It's not required to be crazy, but it certainly helps. Raising his wand, Sirius took a breath and began to speak. I, Sirius Orion Black, lord of the most ancient and noble house of Black, accept back into the family Narcissa Black and her son Draco Malfoy. I hereby recall to the house of Black Andromeda Tonks, her consort Ted, and their child Nymphadora Tonks. The fall of the House of Black is over. The restoration of the clan begins. Sirius slashed his wand down, and a flare of silver light flashed out, signifying magic had accepted his oath, and the family magics would again bind and empower those who had been cut away from the house by marriage contract or expulsion. Frithweaver smiled, tooth hidden, and patted Sirius Black on the hand with her own clawed one. It is good to see House Black growing strong and whole again. This makes you better allies for our Harry and the clan he has brought into our family. Sirius at that point smiled, and the marauder's sense of humor should have made Harry worry, but his lack of experience with Sirius being serious had left him unable to spot his prankster peeking out from the Lord Black mask until too late. Dear lady and second mother of my godson Harry, while House Black has been blessed with a small increase, your son Harry has yet to tell you of his rather bountiful increase in your own clan. You are about to be a grandmother. Frithweaver froze. Fangborn choked on the cookie he was eating and had to have his back thumped by Glitterbright several times to keep him from choking to death. All goblin eyes turned to Hermione, and she held up both her hands in protest. Do not look at me. Harry and I haven't even gotten as far as kissing yet. He was two-timing both me and Noodle with another snake, and you are about to have 40 grandchildren. Hermione protested. He was too young. There was no reason to expect her to let him live, let alone choose to let him quicken her eggs. She is 1,000 years old, and he is barely out of the nest. I have failed as a reptile. Stupid mammal breeding impulses. This is not my fault. Look at Mouse Giver. She is properly raised by me. Speaker bites the first snake he sees, doesn't even give her a courtship dance first. I am so deeply ashamed. Noodle hissed in protest. Harry, long broken to translation duties, explained to grown-ups and goblins what Noodle said. Frithweaver was out of her seat and in Harry's face in seconds, her claws digging into his shoulders and her eyes burning with the fires of goblin greed and/or anger. Where are my grandbabies? Frithweaver asked. Harry, casting a glance at Sirius, was looking innocent like he was trying to meddle in innocence at the Olympics. Hermione, who was looking smug, because in fact she had told him so, and Noodle, who was looking disapproving, because he really thought he raised Harry better. Harry tried smiling, failed utterly, then switched to Hermione mode information dump. They are in the Chamber of Secrets with their mother. She isn't a goblin. Started Harry, because it was important to establish first that she was bound to be a little disappointed no matter who he took home. She isn't a human either. Harry continued, which was also true. Millicent was laughing quietly, but so hard she was about ready to fall off her chair. Neville was blushing so badly that he looked like a tomato. Luna was watching the confession like a crumple-horned snorkack mating dance, smiling and clapping softly. Hermione was wincing, like each phrase was a bludger to the sensibilities. Frithweaver looked horrified. She isn't a dwarf, is she? Griphook himself looked momentarily shocked. Harry beamed, finally happy to deliver some good news. She is most definitely not a dwarf. In the end, they simply had to apparate to Hogsmeade and walk up to Hogwarts, causing quite the stir. None of the kids could apparate, and neither Sirius nor Narcissa had been to the chamber. Harry grabbed Hagrid from his hut, on the principle that if anyone in Hogwarts had any idea about healthy hatching of basilisks, it would be Hagrid. 4 goblins, 2 adults, a half-giant, 1 noodle and a small horde of students, as the Weasley twins somehow magically knew when the Queen of Beaters re-entered the school and tromped up to Moaning Myrtle's bathroom. Professor Snape saw the procession and made an objection to the presence of outsiders. What are you doing here, Black? You should be in Azkaban, not trespassing at Hogwarts with goblins of all creatures. Snape hissed. You should have discovered shampoo in that potions book in the last decade, Snivelus, but it's an imperfect world. Griphook, Frithweaver and I are here to inspect our son and godson's school. There have been some questions about security and safety. Sirius said airily. Snape looked down his nose, which was something that took some doing, as Snape was shorter than Sirius, and he had rather a lot of nose to look down. And why is Hagrid along? Snape asked. What kind of idiot would allow me in Hogwarts unsupervised? Quipped Sirius. Hagrid is along to be the responsible adult. Snape sneered, since when does Rubeus Hagrid count a responsible adult? Hermione answered calmly before escalation joined the party. Hagrid is given charge of the first years when they come to the castle before they are sorted. Unless you are saying that you think Sirius Black is more mature than an unsorted first year, then Hagrid is the best choice for chaperone. Frithweaver smiled a wide tooth-open smile at Snape and patted Hermione on the arm. Millicent, Narcissa, and Draco offered Snape small nods as they passed their stunned professor. Faced with the challenge of declaring Sirius Black a functional adult or accepting their presence, the poor potions master looked like his brain had simply ceased functioning. In Moaning Myrtle's bathroom, the serpent-marked sink awaited their commands. Noodle hissed to the door to open it. Open, tramping down the stairs that patient transfiguration had carved into half the ramp, leaving the snake-side rough stone for slithering. They entered the fabled Chamber of Secrets. Frithweaver, Griphook, Glitterbright, and Fangborn all stopped in awe and wonder at the runework woven into the chamber. It was both within Hogwarts and not, being a pocket dimension rather than a simple spatial expansion, explaining how it had remained a secret for so long. Its entrances were within Hogwarts, but the chamber itself only shared those 2 points of intersection with normal space. Hogwarts was so heavy because it needed all those tons of stones to anchor all the powers the Founders wove into it, of which the Chamber of Secrets was not even the most potent, just the most dangerous. As Harry led them into the chamber, he fell forward and shifted into his animagus form, and a 20-foot basilisk slid forward. Morgana's sweet perky nipples. Harry's really a basilisk. Sirius swore loudly. Merlin, but she's beautiful. Choked Hagrid as he stumbled forward, tears in his eyes as he saw a 60-foot female basilisk curled on 40 eggs the size of dragon eggs. Sire of my brood, why are there giants and goblins in my chamber? Are you bringing them as food for our children? Sura, Queen of Serpents, hissed. Since Frithweaver had taught Hermione how to weave the clan magic runes into Noodle, Harry, and the rest, she knew all of those Hermione had marked inherited the parsley-tongue from Harry as the speaker and father of the clan. Suddenly, she felt the lack of that gift. Hermione sighed, looked at Neville, who would answer honestly, Millicent, who would answer humorously, and Harry, who was twining necks with the single most dangerous monster in the British Isles, as if they were necking at a drive-in, decided she was the only remaining translator. Queen of Serpents, I bring the mother, father, brother, sister, and godfather of the sire of your brood, along with the rest of Speaker's clan. Hermione hissed, then turned to the various races of confused adults to explain. Sura, Queen of Serpents, wondered if Harry brought you as food for the nestlings, but I told her that you are Harry's family, come to welcome the new clan members. Hermione said, wondering if this had been covered in care of magical creatures. Not yet, but maybe it was in the newt materials. Sura slithered swiftly off her eggs, moving to flick her tongue to taste the air and magic around the goblins and humans. I smell him on them, blood in some, magic in others. They do not come to kill our nestlings as threats to their kind. The Queen of Serpents hissed, her lids trembling as she warred with the instinct to raise them to petrify or kill to defend her eggs. Hermione translated, and Frithweaver pulled her dagger and slashed her palm, letting the blood fall. I swear upon my blood and magic that all of Harry Potter's children are my grandchildren. They will have a place in the clan, food from our table, sanctuary behind our wards, and every blade of the clan raised in their protection. So mote it be. Frithweaver swore, Hermione rushing to translate into Parseltongue as the blood burned gold and vanished as magic accepted the oath. Sirius pulled out his wand. I am Harry's godfather. I swore to myself long ago that if Pronglet went and got a girl pregnant at Hogwarts, I would make sure they were raised with all the protections of my house, since James and Lily weren't there to provide house Potters. I was expecting a fellow student, would have loved to tell James it was an older girl, and wish I could have seen Lily's face when I told her it was 40 children. Bloody overachiever. I swear upon my blood and magic, no child of Harry's will want for anything while I live. They will be members of my clan, and whatever gold, magic, or might can provide for their protection I will give. So mote it be. Sirius spoke, and the flash of the magic flared from his wand to wash over everyone in the cavern. The basilisk turned to Noodle, who hissed at her. The runes they carved into me, because I was bound to Speaker, make me smarter, make my magic stronger, and make Speaker and I once clan. Goblins do not send their nestlings out alone and hope they live. Goblins hunt and hide, kill and feast together. If you allow them to become part of Speaker's clan with all of these, then none of your nestlings will stand alone until they are strong and powerful as you. When fully grown, they will be even more powerful. Noodle swore while Hermione translated for grown-ups and goblins. Harry and Hagrid were inspecting the eggs, Hagrid cheering and chattering away as he explained how close they were to hatching, needing only a little bit more magic to quicken their blood to waking. The Queen coiled and thought. She knew that Noodle had dared to attack her, and his strike had actually hurt her. The bushy-haired female had actually taken the other eye, which no witch or wizard had dared in 1,000 years. This rune marking that bound them as clan not only made them powerful, but bound them to defend each other. Basilisk were meant to be alone, but of her clutch most were meant to die. This was the way of the world. Live in solitude, hated by all that lived, see your children all or at least mostly die before they could become strong enough to defend themselves. This was the way of nature. She looked at the toothy smile of Frithweaver. She wanted her grandbabies. She wanted them all to live, to grow strong, to kill and not die. This was the goblin way. The sire of her brood, her speaker, was a goblin. Nature demanded her children be sent off to die alone. Goblins demanded that her children be marked with runes of power, tied to clan and kin, never to be alone, never to stand alone, never to fight alone. Nature could get bitten and die. Her children would be goblins. Speaker, sire of my brood, mark our children. Bind them to your clan. I waited 1,000 years for my promised mate. I would not see one of my children die. I will not bear another for 600 or 700 years. I would know my children still lived by then. The Queen of Serpents finally pronounced. Narcissa Black grabbed Sirius' arm and whispered to him, Sirius, I know this isn't your strong suit, but this is treason. You are making an alliance outside the Wizagamot, outside wizards and witches altogether. That is against the law. Narcissa whispered. Millicent strode over and spoke loud enough for all to hear. Lady Black, you are mistaken. Lord Black is simply making an alliance inside his extended family. It isn't even outside the family, as Harry is his godson and Griphook's son by law. All of us are Harry's clan by goblin adoption with our rune markings, even Noodle, so outside species or not, it is still inside family. Millicent said, stating her position on the law. Neville finally spoke up, his voice quiet but musing. Longbottom, Selwyn, Black. That is 3 of the founding 12 families of magical Britain, 3 of the 6 that still exist. Add the Weasleys and Malfoys, and that is 5 of the sacred 28 founders of the Wizagamot, a good third of the houses that are still alive or will survive this generation, thanks to Voldemort and Grindelwald slaughtering most of them. Sirius grinned. Well, never let it be said that all that time James and I spent riding around on Muggle motorcycles was wasted. If you want to start a rebellion, matching tattoos seems like it's almost required. Hermione put a hand to her head and massaged her temple. Sirius, you can't seriously be thinking of getting everyone here marked into Harry's clan, can you? That would be putting all your houses and vassals into an alliance nearly as large as anything in the wizard or goblin world, but loyal to neither. Of course I can, and I'm always serious, Sirius quipped, enjoying that the usually bright witch had wandered into his favorite running joke. Sirius turned to face the room, and his voice was now the iron of Lord Black, not the joking marauder. Voldemort is coming back. You all know it. He is coming, and the Ministry is going to deny it until it is too late to do anything. Dumbledore is going to sing Cumbia and ask for group hugs, send his people out to toss stunners at people who will boil the blood in their body and blow their body to bits of scrap meat. They are going to lose. Lily and Harry are the only reason we didn't finish losing the last time. When they fall, I don't plan on falling with them. When they fall, all the old oaths bind us no more. When they fall, the houses of Black and Potter go to war. Sirius said. Neville looked up. The Longbottoms. Draco smiled. The Malfoy. Millicent smiled, and it was a thing of teeth. The Selwyns, Bulstrodes, Weasleys. Griphook smiled. The Hematite clan and those sworn to us. About a third of the Goblin Nation owes us alliance, allegiance, or debt. Hermione gestured at the nest and the rest of the students, the rest of us, and about 40 baby basilisk, which is a bit like saying smugglable dragons or wizard equivalent of Muggle nuclear weapons. Hermione thought about it for a little bit. If I do weave the same runes into you that I did Harry, Noodle, and the rest, you will all gain his parcel tongue, you and your heirs. That will mean that the Alliance will all have the ability to work with Harry's basilisk babies. Narcissa looked at Hermione in shock, as did Griphook. That is impossible. Parselmouth is inherited from the Slytherin line. He bound it to his blood. Narcissa said, It is a wizard ability. Griphook offered cautiously. Hermione shook her head. I wove it into everyone with goblin adoption magic, not a wand. It isn't a magical transformation, it's an adoption. Once you are clan, you are clan. If you have children, they are clan. Our clan just happens to be born from the union of Speaker and Noodle's magic. Narcissa went bone white in shock. You can make any witch, wizard, or goblin a parselmouth, and they can pass it down. The amount of power you are talking about would set the Iquor into a panic and drive the ministry to war. Inside of a generation or two, you would be more powerful than entire wizarding nations. Harry turned back from basilisk to human, letting Sura rub her head along his as he turned to face Narcissa and the rest. I offer you forbidden knowledge and power, ancient and forbidden magic delivered through dark and prohibited rituals. Tell me you are going to say no, Harry said. Narcissa slapped Draco on the back of his head when the boy began snickering in a most unslytherin way. Narcissa adjusted her dress, then sniffed and said quietly, I never said I refused. I only pointed out it was treason. Hagrid's booming voice said, Oh, the little Dickens are starting to wake. I think them oaths started them waking. You had best get hunting. I think the little dears will wake up hungry. Can't be more than about 4 or 5 hours before they start trying to get out. Hagrid, being Hagrid, found the idea of being trapped in the Chamber of Secrets with Slytherin's monster and 40 hatching basilisk to be quite the high point of his life. Frithweaver took charge. Hermione, Griphook, and Fangborn have much goblin silver ready. You will do me first, so I can help you with the rest. We will have to have all the adults bound before the babies hatch, so we can speak to them, Hermione pointed out, and not die. Frithweaver grinned. Death is iron, grandbabies are gold. Every child is a risk. Best you learn that before you have any, or the little dears will get you. Turning to Harry, she began shouting, What are you doing standing here? My grandbabies will be born soon. I will die of shame if they go hungry, but you will die first. Go, hunt, prove you are goblin, not garden gnome, and provide for the clan. Neville, Millicent, and the Weasleys followed Harry out into the forbidden forest, where things were a fair bit safer than the chamber. The night was long, and Narcissa Black felt she had become immune to shock. She sat alone on the throne of Salazar Slytherin, but failed to either notice or care what she sat on. What she was looking at stunned her beyond reason. There was Harry Potter in the form of a 20-foot basilisk, coiled up with a 60-foot basilisk, the companion of the founder of the sacred House of Slytherin. That was disturbing on a few levels, but she could probably cope with it. A big black Grim, also her cousin and lord of her house, was curled up with 2 baby basilisk. A huge polar bear had 2 Weasley, and about a dozen basilisk curled on or around them. A rather plus-sized badger was a virtual nest of a dozen basilisk babies. Her Draco and Luna were all cuddled up together with another half-dozen. Hermione had Noodle and 4 of the basilisk, and each of the goblins had passed out in a pile with a basilisk wrapped around them. She was in Salazar Slytherin's own Chamber of Secrets, yet she whispered in quiet horror, They have all gone Hufflepuff, even the snakes. Narcissa would love to object, but the rune bindings of her new clan adoption were already merging with her personal magic, weaving through her family magic, and making changes in her body and mind. Parseltown had marked the Dark Lord as special, a gift that marked him as the heir of Slytherin, a gift that let him stand against the whole of the wizarding world and nearly topple it. A gift he shared with no one, not even an heir of his own body. Now she had it. Narcissa Black, Parselmouth. Narcissa Black, Goblin Witch Rebel. Given the gift the Dark Lord claimed was his alone, by a mudblood taught by a goblin using magic given by the boy who lived. Cuddle me, I am cold. A small voice hissed from her feet. She looked, and one of Sirius' snakes had slithered to her. I thought you were sleeping with the Dogfather, Narcissa hissed, using the noodle-given name for Sirius. Dogfather farts, and his magic tastes like chasing over open ground. Your magic tastes like silence and secrets, venomed one. The little snake hissed, giving the name that she had wanted to be offended by. Now, from a basilisk, in the holy tongue of Slytherin, she liked the taste of the name better. Come, child, you may sleep with the venomed one. No one harms my children. Narcissa Black felt the stirrings of a magical bond between them. Whatever Harry Potter had started, then dragged her son into, Sirius Black's suggestion had finally sealed her inside it. Narcissa Black had chosen a side. The venomed one. Yes, she thought she could get used to that. Besides, now that Draco was growing up, another child might suit her well. This one was already a better conversationalist than her ex-husband. 44. Chapter 44 Home is where the Horcrux is. Narcissa Black felt the runes changing her magic. No, that wasn't right. Narcissa had been raised in the ancient traditions. She had given herself to the rituals at the Sabbats, at the equinox and solstice, and felt the purity of bringing the magic inside her into harmony with the magic of the world. Wand magic was a thing of the mind. You used your wand motion, visualization, and incantation as a sort of shorthand to create a structure that focused the ambient magic of the world to enact an effect. The Chinese Wujian would inscribe an elaborate character upon a piece of paper and then ignite it with their will, while the Hindu spiritualists would make elaborate seals through motions of their whole body, then release their will. It was all variations of the same external manifestation of will-binding magic to create an effect that generations of practitioners had layered into the magic of the world. Creating a pattern, a small amount of energy could generate a predictable effect through. It was safe, knowable, predictable, and limited to human desire. This was the foundation of civilized magic, and inside it were the schools of light and dark magic, where deliberate limitations were written into the spell forms to bind a given working to the human understandings of light and dark, with all the emotional and therefore intent-based baggage of those concepts. The collective understanding of humanity gave those schools power to do things beyond the normal for wand magic, but with limitations and consequences. Ritual magic was different. You connected to the magic, opening yourself to become a part of a working that was both beyond your skin and your control, and within yourself on levels beneath your conscious awareness or control. It was primal, instinctive, ecstatic, and wild. The basic forms, like the basic runes, were known and knowable, but they were only the connection points to the wild magic, the unformed magic of creation, that spark of divine will that looked upon non-being and willed it to take form. Ritual magic stood on the border between the real and the unreal, where the needs and currents of power in the world itself mattered more than the witch or wizard's will. If you tried to move against those currents, you could be snuffed out or simply ignored, depending on if you moved counter or crossways to the needs of magic. If you moved with the needs of magic, miracles could happen. It was dangerous, wild, unpredictable, and belonged to the world, not to humanity alone. The wild simply was. Humanity was a part of it, but so were every other race that could sense power and make the choice to move with it, and in some cases to shape it. Wild magic was about the truth of what you were, not what you thought you were, wished you were, or admitted you were. Lies got you killed in the wild magic, which is why it was the power that bound wizards' oaths and family magic. To take up the wild magic was to be forced to set aside what you wanted to think about yourself and face the reality of what you were. Narcissa felt the clan runes, of course. Athala for family, to bind them together, alges for protection to keep them safe. Yet watching the rune be woven in her own flesh, her rune had been a shock. Thurisaz, thorn, the rune that symbolized reaction, defense, conflict, catharsis, regeneration. Narcissa remembered her sister Andromeda when they were being taught the runes. She called Thurisaz the bitch rune. The thorn hedge that kept people away, the scourge that stripped away lies and defenses until the truth lay bloody and naked before it. It was a rune of bitterness and truth, yet the rune used to turn attackers' magic back upon themselves. Thurisaz was not a passive defense, it was the bane to those who harmed what it defended. Venomed One Noodle had named her, not Poisoned One, for she did not weaken or harm those she protected. Venomed One, for those that came for her, and hers alone would feel her bite. Witch magic was more dangerous than wand magic, because you had to face yourself before you could take it up. Narcissa was a bitch, but she looked after her own. She was never going to be like the long-bottom boy, who made everyone feel better about themselves just by breathing and looking like some sort of body pillow for otherwise rational and self-respecting witches. Her healing was different. Hers was thorny, taking up the broken pieces of yourself and learning to cut the hand that tried to strike you again. She looked upon the children who had determined to set themselves against the world and sighed. They needed her, the dark witch of thorns, the venomed one, even if they didn't know it. She looked over at Sirius Black, the eternal man-child, and saw the rune of his own nature that had been graven over his heart. She smirked. If she was a bitch, and that was hard to swallow, then Sirius the man-child would choke on his. The vaguely T-shaped rune T was shown in the center of his chest. T was the rune of kingship. Masculinity, justice, leadership, logic, battle. Sirius had always been the symbol of masculinity. If he wasn't every witch's dream, he certainly tried to make as many of them come true as possible in his Hogwarts days. He had been a bit of a man-whore, no, a lot of a man-whore, but quite gentlemanly about it. A lot of her dorm mates talked, but she never heard about it from Sirius. That one mark in his favor, but for the rest, his turning into a dog was not a surprise. Frankly, she blamed Sirius for Harry impregnating a basilisk on their first meeting. It wasn't fair, but Sirius was family, and black family didn't do fair. Harry was basically a sweet boy, if a bit naive, and a good influence on Draco. With Millicent and her Draco to modify his Hufflepuffian tendencies, Harry might well become the greatest wizard of this age. Harry was the catalyst for serious change. For Harry, he moved past the boy and became the man. Masculine, yes, but he learned the truth of justice in Azkaban. He could no longer afford to be the brash hero charging into battle. The Ministry, the Dark Lord, Dumbledore, the rival great families, rival goblin clans, and the mass of very dangerous sheep that were the public of wizarding Britain all were threats that could and would destroy Harry Potter for the crime of their being short-sighted and stupid, or because he legitimately would not allow their plans to crush those he would defend. Sirius would have to become the leader Arcturus Black long ago demanded he become, the leader of House Black, the most feared of all the great houses. He would have to be not just a warrior, but a politician, a strategist, an empire builder. He would have to build a nation around the boy who lived before the nations of the world destroyed him in their fear. Harry, Merlin bless his innocent little soul, was determined to destroy the Dark Lord for his many past, present, and planned future crimes, which was just, right, and holy, of course. He was also utterly unwilling to tolerate the casual cruelty, injustice, and corruption that was the foundation of the stagnant and declining wizarding world. He had no plans to change the world, but he was either going to remake it in his image, or it would wipe him out. He was perhaps the only one of his company that did not understand it. For her many and various sins, magic had chosen to make her Harry's designated Dark Witch, and Sirius Black the Warlord who together would clear the path for the boy who lived to do something distressingly Hufflepuffian. At least Hufflepuffs put in the work on the details, not charging blindly ahead like a Gryffindor, trusting that truth and justice will somehow magically fix everything they smash. It bothered her to admit that blackmail and assassination legitimately could not fix things. Wizarding, Britain had fallen so far that only revolution could fix it. She petted the sleeping basilisk at her breast and sighed. Revolution was so unslytherin, but Harry Potter had actually got an army of Salazar Slytherin's basilisk on his side. Even if all the little darlings did was eat and sleep. Hagrid was over the moon about it. The shaggy brute couldn't stop talking about how unnatural, of course he called it magical, their growth was. A clutch that should have taken decades to hatch took barely months. Basilisk that should eat once a month in a growth spurt are eating and growing like dragons, doubling their weight on nearly a daily basis. Narcissa could feel the magic of the Chamber of Secrets, Salazar Slytherin's own sanctuary, and beyond it the magic of Hogwarts itself, pouring into the basilisk, drawn by the power of Harry Potter's blood and magic, drawn by the power of the goblin runes carved in goblin silver into their very flesh. Runes that grew as the snakes did, the goblin silver laying down new layers as a goblin warriors did after every kill. When the basilisk took to the forbidden forest to hunt with the children, the magic of the forest sang so loudly her bones ached. The earth gave song beneath their feet as the children ran through a forest that grown wizards feared to tread, and its horrors fled before them like so many frightened rabbits. The centaur and unicorn saluted as they passed, but the acromantual problem was virtually eliminated. Out of respect for Hagrid, Aragog was left alive, but the monsters of his eldest children and the 20 nests they had made surrounding the castle in growing and terrible threat were pretty much shattered. It turned out that having someone to cut their food for them made acromantula the favored food of growing basilics. The spiders flee before Slytherin's monster, not just a catchy phrase, it was the truth. Of course you can't hide from Neville Longbottom in a forest, and he doesn't much care for spiders. The school year had ended, and they would be leaving Hogwarts and the chamber to their various homes. But Griphook had his goblins build a fireplace into the chamber and connect it to the Flu network. Hermione had Griphook help ward her own home, so the Muggle Grangers could be on the Flu network without the Ministry being able to note or access their home. Now the chamber and its basilisk would be accessible to all. Narcissa had been quietly impressed that Noodle had ambushed Hagrid and woven compulsions into his brain that would forbid him from not only speaking of the basilisk and the chamber, but from even thinking about them even under a Legermen's attack. She had been planning on poisoning him, giants being otherwise very hard to kill subtly, but the children had removed him as an information risk without murder. She had never held the Hufflepuffs in the contempt of many of her house. They could be as practical as any Slytherin. They simply were willing to work harder to find methods other than murder. If forced to be honest, she had noticed that the Dark Lord's rise would have been far more successful if he had remembered that there was both a carrot and a stick once he began his rise. Fear sometimes caused more problems than it solved. Today Sirius Black would return to Grimmauld Place and take up residence as its lord. Narcissa knew about Walburga's portrait and what Sirius' mother both thought and said of her wayward Gryffindor son. She smiled cruelly. Malfoy Manor had never been as wonderful to return to as it was right now. She laughed softly at the welcome Sirius would receive with half-blood Harry and Muggle-born Hermione in tow. Honestly, only Noodle and the baby basilisk would be welcomed. Walburga was too Slytherin to be impolite to magical serpents. Harry Potter was happy. He was taking his godfather, Sirius Black, home. Frithweaver had sent Glitterbright and Fangborn, along with Harry and Hermione, to Grimmauld Place with Sirius, because she needed to know it was properly secure, and because Sirius needed a little socializing, since Azkaban is to interpersonal skills as unlimited treacle tart is to diets. Sirius was looking at the Flu powder bowl on top of the Chamber of Secrets fireplace with the face of a man marching to his own execution. Oh, wait. He had been stunned unconscious when he was taken to Azkaban, so that didn't hold true. Worse, he was looking at the Flu powder with the same fear he had when Aunt Doria Potter made him eat his Brussels sprouts when he ran to Potter Manor to get away from his family at Grimmauld Place. Now, decades later, he was returning to Grimmauld Place, and he found himself oddly preferring Brussels sprouts. You look worried, Sirius. Are you sure you are ready to face everything Grimmauld Place means to you? Hermione asked softly. Harry looked confused, because home to him meant everything. The idea that home might be the place you ran from not to was something he didn't process easily. I think Brussels sprouts receive a bad name. They may look like someone cut the balls of a green man and made you eat them, and if they are overdone they taste like swamp, but they are good preparation for life. They are on the plate for a reason, and go down a lot better if you squeeze them between bites of something you actually like. It's your own damned fault if you leave them for last. Sura said honestly. Ha! Sirius, it's 9 in the morning. Who is threatening you with vegetables? Harry said in some confusion. Glitterbright smacked her younger brother on the back because his head was getting annoyingly out of reach. That was a metaphor, you moron. He means you have to learn to take the good with the bad, because life is usually mixed. If you avoid the bad, it just piles up until you get left with a pile of nothing but bad to work through. Glitterbright said, turning to Hermione. They shared an eye roll of men. What can you do with them that doesn't involve digging holes to hide the bodies? And turned back to Sirius. Sirius straightened up and took a pinch of Flu powder in his hands. Harry, you are very lucky. You have nothing but smart and dangerous women in your life. This will cost you any number of hexes and possibly leave permanent dents in the back of your head, but you will probably screw up less of your life than I did. Grimmauld Place is where Brussels sprouts get condemned to if no one eats them. It is where depression goes to die when it can't take it anymore. It is the only place on earth that can make me miss Azkaban, and it's all mine. Let's have a sleepover. Sirius tossed the Flu powder into the fireplace and, cuddling his baby basilisk, BG or Best Girl, snarled Grimmauld Place and disappeared. Harry grinned. It can't be that bad. He took his baby basilisk and stepped forward. Come on, Ramen, let's go visit Sirius. Grimmauld Place. Harry disappeared in a flash. Noodle and Hermione's basilisk Viagra exchanged a look across Hermione's frowning face and settled in. It seems the wisest witch of her generation was convinced it could indeed be that bad. Dollar Noodle, you watch the kids. The Black family is only not the scariest thing in Wizarding Britain, because Voldemort didn't bother to hide what he did, and the Blacks kept the worst of it behind closed doors. Sirius didn't get that way without damage, and Narcissa is a reaction to something I don't really want to know. Consider Grimmauld Place another chamber of secrets until we have killed everything Sirius is too used to avoiding to warn us against. Hermione hissed. Stepping into the green fire of the flue, she said Grimmauld Place and disappeared. Meanwhile, in Albania Lucius No Name, once Lord Malfoy followed a laughing witch as she said goodbye to her gossipy friends as they left the tour group from Kruger Castle. He dared not act against her inside Kruger Castle, the wards laid down centuries ago by Gjurj Castriot Skanderbeg, Albania's national hero, and reinforced by centuries of proud Albanian wizards ever since, could rival those of Hogwarts. He dared not strike at Bertha Jorkins there, but he could not let her escape. Bertha Jorkins was his hope for survival. Lucius, No Name, dared not return to the Dark Lord empty-handed. Terrible was the cost of failure for those in the Dark Lord's service, but torture could be survived. Useless, on the other hand, got you killed in slow and inventive ways that Lucius had always enjoyed watching, but never dreamed to face himself. To carry the news that Bellatrix, Rabastan, and Rudolphus Lestrange were all dead, and Sirius was free, that Lucius Malfoy had lost title, wealth, and position would be enough to drive the Dark Lord mad. That Harry Potter had driven the Dementors of Azkaban from Hogwarts by magical force would be 1,000 times worse, unless Lucius Malfoy came with something useful to offer. Lucius had been part of Ludo Bagman and Barty Crouch Sr.'s drive to bring the Quidditch World Cup and Triwizard Tournament back to Britain. The Quidditch World Cup Bagman and Crouch wanted for the fame and political capital, but the Triwizard Tournament was a way to get access to the most protected person in Hogwarts, and a way to draw him out from Dumbledore's protection. To Ludo Bagman and Barty Crouch, it was about restarting an ancient tradition that brought the focus of the wizarding world onto Wizarding Britain for their short-term political aims. To Lucius Malfoy, it had been the chance to get the Goblet of Fire into Hogwarts. The Goblet of Fire was a magical artifact which bound those chosen champions to a series of tasks to test their prowess and prove who was the best in the wizarding world. It had ended when the death toll became too high, not simply all the champions, but a fair number of judges and audience members. The Goblet of Fire was so ancient no one remembers where it came from, but it was old magic. Once a champion's name was chosen, they had to compete or have their magic stripped from them forever. It had been repurposed to test the strongest graduating students of Durmstrang, Beauxbaton, and Hogwarts after the Statue of Secrecy, but had been used to bind champions to settle wars and feuds all the way back to the early Iron Age. Lucius hadn't been blind to the possibilities of the Goblet of Fire being inside Hogwarts with the boy who lived. His own plans to simply kill the boy in the contest were obviously no more since he had lost his position as a Board of Governors member and a part of the Goblet of Fire organizing committee, but he was not empty-handed. He knew his Dark Lord was in the forests of Albania as a wraith. Fenrir Greyback had been bringing victims to the Dark Lord for offerings to slowly build up his strength, but he was little more than a magical thug as a werewolf and useless to restore the Dark Lord. Lucius knew Ludo Bagman was just a retired Quidditch star, a former celebrity who was a cross between Gilderoy Lockhart and Horace Slughorn. He was little more than famous for being famous, lacking any talent beyond broom and beater bat, save one. He was an excellent social networker. Like Horace Slughorn, he had friends and contacts everywhere. He could open doors wherever he needed. He just had no talent to actually do his job. For that, he had Bertha Jorkins. Bertha was a notorious gossip and complete airhead, but she could do ministerial paperwork in her sleep. As a witch, she was mediocre. As an administrator and organizer, she was a generational genius. Ludo, being Ludo, had no idea what a genius he had access to, content to glad hand and pose for photos, while she translated every half-baked idea he had into something reasonable successful. Barty Crouch SR, on the other hand, still had his eye on the position of Minister for Magic. When his son was caught as a Death Eater at the end of the Blood War, he lost his chance at power. Crouch had been relegated to the Department of International Cooperation. Since Britain seldom cooperated with anyone, it was a bit like being the Dementor's fan club chair, neither much of an honor or filled with opportunities to shine. When Ludo came to him with the plans for the World Cup and Triwizard Tournament, he was very reluctant. Ludo was an oaf and could barely brew tea, let alone potions. Any plan of his was less likely to succeed than explode. Then Crouch met Bertha, an airhead typical of Ludo's choices. Barty was ready to dismiss her until he saw her proposals. She was a genius at organization. Thorough didn't cut it. She had a sense for what was required and a network of fellow gossips in the ministry that allowed her work to swan through and just casually have every other department add their constructive bits until what came back to her desk was little short of genius. Not being an idiot, Barty Crouch SR threw his entire support, name, and department behind both the Quidditch World Cup bid and the Triwizard Tournament. Unlike Ludo Bagman, he knew how to milk this for all the political capital, and with Bertha Jorkin's organization, it would be a success. Since no one with two brain cells to rub together would believe Ludo Bagman was responsible, and neither Ludo nor Bertha recognized her as an organizational genius, the credit would fall entirely to Barty Crouch Sr. With Crouch shining as a star on the international stage, the crumbling Fudge administration in full ass covering Mode, and Dumbledore facing public criticism and humiliation, the chance to actually mount a bid for Minister of Magic was within Crouch's grasp. Harry Potter's challenge to Sirius Black's imprisonment and any inquiry into how it came to pass would kill Crouch's chances, but with the Triwizard Tournament coming to Hogwarts, well, Harry was a student and a supposed hero. The Triwizard Tournament had killed hundreds of heroes over the year. Harry Potter couldn't call for any investigation if he was dead, and without Potter, Sirius Black had no real reason to fight for anything. So many plans for the future of wizarding Britain hung on the knowledge locked up in the head of one utterly forgettable witch, Bertha Jorkins. Lucius No-Name smiled as she walked past him towards her hotel. He spoke only a single word. Imperio. The curse hit Bertha, and her will was no match to the former master of Malfoy Manor. He took her mind in claws of darkest magic, and she followed him to his carriage. The Thestrals pulling it put out powerful muggle-repelling charms, and his own wards on the carriage would keep anyone else from noticing. He would not go to the Dark Lord empty-handed. Lucius had no idea what his Dark Lord would do with the knowledge locked up in Bertha Jorkin's head, but he knew that Harry Potter and his little friends would pay a price for humiliating Lucius that would make the simple death of Potter's parents look like small change. For the first time in months, Lucius smiled happily. Bertha smiled back, the mindless happy feeling washing over her mind as the imperious curse swallowed her made the screaming of her soul all the sweeter. Lucius felt his dark mark start to itch. His Dark Lord was near enough to hunt Lucius down. Soon his revenge would begin. Grimold Place, London, Wizarding Britain. Filthy blood traitor, disgrace to the family, heartbreak of his noble mother. The ancient and twisted house elf grumbled as Sirius appeared in Grimold Place and stepped from the flue. That is filthy blood traitor and lord, heartbreak of his bitch of a mother, and rightwise ruler of the House of Black. The place looks like a really poorly maintained pyramid after some camels with bowel control issues got in. What in Merlin's name have you been doing all this time, creature, you useless git? Sirius corrected his family elf unkindly. Harry then Hermione stepped through, and Noodle dropped from Hermione's shoulders and slithered towards the house elf. Mistress for bad creature to clean. Noble Regulus was dead. Noble Bellatrix was imprisoned. Only nasty, dirty blood traitor Lord Sirius remains. Noble mistress for bad creature to clean. Let filthy blood traitor Lord Sirius wallow in dust and filth like his dirty mudblood friends. Creature hissed. Sirius' wand was in his hand, but Noodle was blocking the way. Noodle began to sway in front of the house elf, letting his eyes capture and bewitch the elf's eyes and mind. This one is broken, twisted. Dark magic has corrupted his soul. It is insane. Noodle hissed. Sirius smirked. Well, it's that kind of house. Watch yourself. If you see a rat, it's probably a vampire. If you see a vampire, it's probably possessed by a demon. If you see a demon, it's probably trying to get out before something frightening eats it. Harry and Hermione were putting on gloves as Fangborn and Glitterbright stepped in. They both went tense and drew their magic together as their goblin senses felt the corruption. This is different. This is like the cup. This is soul-fouling corruption. This elf has been twisted not just by dark magic, but by dark soul magic. Noodle hissed. Fangborn stepped forward and came to examine Creature. This elf has been corrupted by a Horcrux. Creature snarled at the goblin and went to snap his fingers to banish him, but Sirius stopped him. Stop, Creature. These goblins are our guests. You will not harm them. Noodle and Fangborn are telling me that this house, and you, are corrupted by a Horcrux. The only Merlin be damned idiot using those in this century is Voldemort. Did that twisted twat leave something in my house? Sirius snapped. Creature began to stamp his feet, gripping his ears and yanking on them, looking like Darby trying to punish himself. Must not speak of Mistress Dark Lord that way. Must not talk about Master Regulus. Must complete Master Regulus orders. Creature cannot fail Master Regulus, but Creature cannot fulfill Master Regulus' last wish. Creature failed Master Regulus. Creature stamped in a circle, then began pounding his head against the wall. Hermione shouted, "Stop that, you will be hurt." Nasty Mudblood does not give Creature orders. Creature shouted as he began to bang his head twice as hard against the walls. Harry looked at Sirius. "Aren't you going to stop him?" Sirius looked at Creature. "Creature, would you like Nasty Blood traitor Lord Sirius who broke that evil bitch's heart to command you to stop hurting yourself?" Creature stopped and glared. Nasty Blood traitor Master can go kiss a Dementor. He glared, then hammered his head harder into the wall, stumbling back dizzy. "See," said Sirius, "I am all about respecting boundaries and appreciating other cultures." Glitterbright smiled with bared teeth. "Or you just like to watch evil racist twats hammer their heads flat against rune-enhanced pillars?" Sirius touched the side of his nose. "That, my good goblin, is called respecting house elf traditions and honoring his personal choices. Plus, the git deserves it for calling Hermione a mudblood." He thought a bit more. "Hang on, there was something important in that last rambling, though. Creature, you stupid elf, stop banging and answer my question. What did Reggie demand you do that you haven't done? Obviously, it wasn't cleaning." Creature burst into tears, but glared at Sirius. "Most noble Master Regulus gave Creature a locket to destroy. Most noble Master Regulus died to recover this locket, and commanded Creature to live so he could destroy it, but Creature cannot destroy it. Creature must serve Lady Walburga, even if Creature should have killed himself rather than serve filthy blood traitor Lord Sirius, because Creature has not yet fulfilled most noble Master Regulus' last command." Sirius opened his mouth to make a smart remark, but stopped himself, then lowered himself to Creature's eyes. "Creature, I am your master. I am the recognized head of House Black, and you must answer me. How did my brother die?" "Brother Regulus, I loved him. Even if we couldn't stand each other at the end, he was my brother and I loved him. How did he die, Creature? I was never told during the war, and no one visited me in Azkaban with news." Sirius said softly. Creature shuddered and began speaking. "The Dark Lord borrowed Creature to go to the Bad Island. There were many unquiet dead, and a lake of poison the Dark Lord made under the stone of the island, and in that lake of poison and dead he sank his treasure. The Dark Lord made Creature drink the poison, and the pain was so bad Creature would have died if Master Regulus did not command him to live to return. Master Regulus was not happy when Creature told him what he carried, and what Creature had to do. Creature brought Master Regulus back to the Bad Island, and this time Master Regulus drank the poison. He left a fake locket, and commanded me to bring this back home and destroy it. Master Regulus died, because he wouldn't let Creature drink the poison a second time and die himself. Creature is a bad elf, because he could not destroy the Dark Lord's locket, as most noble Master Regulus commanded." Creature began to bash his head against the wall again, only harder than before, as his shame was refreshed. Sirius was busy thinking, but decided to distract the elf before he killed himself accidentally. "Creature, can you get us some sandwiches while we talk about what to do next?" Sirius said, causing Creature to stop and smile like a goblin at Sirius. "Filthy blood traitor Master Black can starve." Creature was commanded by Mistress Walburga not to buy food for dirty, stinking blood traitor Spawn. Creature announced promptly. Sirius had his wand drawn in reflex before he remembered he was trying to be an adult in front of Harry. He sighed, rubbed his head, and decided to cut to the chase. "Creature, bring me the locket." The house elf popped back and tried to drop the locket in Sirius' hands, but Sirius jumped back, and everyone except Harry hissed in fear as the aura of a Horcrux assaulted their senses. Morgana's sweet honeypot. That is Slytherin's locket. The balmy twat Voldemort made two of the Hogwarts founding treasures into bloody Horcrux. First, the Hufflepuff cup, then Slytherin's own locket. What do you want to bet that Ravenclaw's diadem got the same treatment? Hermione frowned. You can't get a ham and cheese, but you can have a Horcrux delivered. Sirius, your family needs serious help. Sirius barked out laughter. That is my joke, young lady. Keep your hands off it. Still, you aren't wrong. What do we do with the damned thing? Harry smiled. We flew Millicent and Neville to join us for lunch. Then we send you out to actually get some lunch. Then we have ham and cheese, and I eat Voldemort's soul. Creature snarled at Harry. Filthy blood traitor boy cannot destroy locket. Master Regulus could not destroy locket. Creature cannot destroy locket. Creature winced as Sirius smacked him in the back of the head for disrespecting Harry. Harry corrected him gently. I am a filthy mudblood. Half-blood technically, not a blood traitor. Just not pure enough to be a proper blood traitor. Still a purely muggle-born, a pair of half-bloods and one blood traitor is all it takes to turn your Dark Lord into an after-dinner mint. If you are a good elf, you can watch as we avenge most noble Master Regulus and destroy the bit of Dark Lord he tried to hide in it. 2 days later, Grimmauld Place was witness to a ritual that was becoming common to the kids, but would have shocked Dumbledore to his soul. With Sirius drumming, Fangborn and Glitterbright warding the outer circle, the 4 original children called the quarters. Neville Longbottom called the earth, and a pillar rose up to hold the locket. The great mass of the earth drew upon the locket, as if it weighed tons, not ounces. Millicent Bulstrode called upon ice, and a great wall followed the edges of the ritual circle, only for Hermione Granger to call upon fire and set the ice aflame. Lastly, Harry called upon air, and a whirlwind took the cold fire flames and wove them into a dome that fully enclosed the ritual space. Harry gave himself to his magic and shifted into a basilisk. Hissing in the holy tongue, Harry called upon Slytherin's locket. Open, he commanded. As the locket opened and the protections on it flared into life, Millicent tapped it with her wand. Issa, she commanded, and for an instant all the wards, runes, and charms woven into the locket stilled. Golden light extending like a sickle from his wand, Neville Longbottom called out Jira, and with a powerful cut, attacked the connection between Voldemort's soul fragment and the locket. As it was severed, Harry struck, his basilisk venom burning not just the physical object, but the soul within. Voldemort's soul fragment fled from the venom, and Harry rose like a snake catching a jumping rabbit to take hold of the soul fragment as it poured from the locket. Hermione called upon the holy fire of the phoenix, the power of life and primal creation as she incanted Kenaz, and set the locket to burn in purifying fire as the soul, denied a path to escape or a path back, had nowhere to run as Harry gulped it down like a fat, tasty rabbit, not the most feared Dark Lord in the last half-century. Millicent cooled the locket with the primal power of her ice. She tucked it into her robes with a smirk. This is Slytherin's locket. You guys got to be Badger heroes with the cup. I am at least going to get every Slytherin pure blood kissing my cauldron when I return Salazar Slytherin's own locket at start of term. If I don't make prefect next year after that, I will have to assassinate Snape. Millicent said happily. Sirius laughed. The idea that Millicent and the kids were still able to focus on house points and making prefect after destroying parts of Voldemort's soul and bringing the end of the war that much closer somehow made him happy. They were still kids. Glitterbright patted Millicent on the arm. Good girl. Killing is good, but without profit, it's really only half a win. Now let's have lunch. If anyone noticed, Creature was stumbling as he served, tears streaming down his face, as the blood traitors and mud bloods made his most noble Master Regulus' last command come true. They didn't point it out. 45. Chapter 45, Quidditch World Cup. Narcissa was growing tired of her tea. She would not drink wine with Rosier and Rockwood. The 2 Death Eaters had avoided Azkaban with the imperious defense, stating Sirius Black had forced them to take the Dark Mark. Honestly, the Dark Mark was a protean charm, and could not be entered into without the actual free will of the subject. That the ministry accepted a solution which any owl-level charm student could tell you was impossible was a sign the system needed to be burned to the ground and reseeded. Wine was served in a clear glass, where any charms would be visible and any rune work would be obvious. Her tea set bore the Black family crest, and anyone who thought they had a potion or poison that could be used against one who bore the black blood in a family tea set would die so horribly that their passing would add further darkness to the Black family shadow. Honestly, she hoped they would try. Conversation had long passed tiresome. Augustus Rockwood smiled. His eyes caught hers, and the feather-light touch of his legerdemacy would have been imperceptible before. She had always found him insightful and charming, surprisingly intelligent and well-read. How much of that was his simply pulling the knowledge from her own head and supplying her the answer he knew she wanted? If she were Ravenclaw, the fact that she had been fooled would humiliate her. If she were Gryffindor, she would call them out. She was Slytherin. Now that Noodle had bound himself to her blood, magic, and mind, she had the same shields as their precious Dark Lord. Her mind was a place of sliding cold scales, bright fangs, and paralyzing venom. The Dark Lord is returning, and the Black family has always sat at his right hand. With your husband gone, the role of his hand in the Wizengamot will openly be played by Lord Parkinson. But socially, and behind closed doors, no one has reached that equals yours. Rockwood said, his legerdemacy softly pushing visions of her taking the place of Bellatrix and Lucius, both in the inner councils. Narcissa smiled, and Rockwood read that as her surrendering to the visions of the future she wanted. When the Dark Lord rises, he will restore the ancient traditions, raise the oldest families to the power and glory they once knew. Can the Dark Lord count on your support and that of your heir? Rockwood said, his passive legerdemacy like the softest feather touch over the surface of her mind, no longer pushing, but straining over the surface of the sea of her thoughts, trying to read its currents unnoticed. Narcissa smiled a tight, closed-lipped smile. She reflected that Slytherins and Goblins shared almost identical social customs. How long had she been so blinded by prejudice that she never understood that whenever she talked to goblins like something between a muggle and a farm animal, she was effectively broadcasting her every inner opinion. The entire time, she faced the equivalent of a fellow Slytherin, showing less composure than a drunken Gryffindor. Honestly, the more she looked at the blood supremacy she was raised in, the less superior their tactics, strategy, and success looked. She put down her teacup and folded her hands in her lap. Taking a deep breath, she fluttered her eyelashes before letting her eyes go wide and open, her smile now baring her teeth as she spoke softly and quietly. Mr. Rockwood, Mr. Rosier, in honor of your long and storied history with my former husband, I shall give you the greatest of all possible gifts to take back to your Dark Lord. Narcissa nodded and felt her cheeks actually stretch as the smile moved into a full feral grin. Oh dear Merlin, she finally understood the rush Sirius got from his Gryffindorish defiance. Her blood quickened, and she felt actual arousal. This was delightful. Her wand was sliding down from its wrist sheath into her hand, unnoticed beside her leg, lost in the folds of her gown. Your allegiance, guessed Rosier, who failed to read the room now as always. Your lives, Narcissa said. He one now pointed at the ground halfway between her guests. Your Dark Lord attempted to rip out my son's soul and desecrate his body with his undead taint. You can tell that jumped-up half-blood with delusions of purity that he isn't even the most powerful half-blood in Britain, and the other one would kill or die to defend my son. I rather think, if I see you gentlemen again, your skulls will be transfigured into soup bowls to feed my guests. Granted, Rosier will be at best a half-serving, but not everyone cares for soup. 3 of them rose. The 2 Death Eaters clearly thought about going for their wands, knowing that Lucius Malfoy had granted Death Eaters immunity to his House Malfoy wards. As they thought that, the light in the room seemed to recede, and their skin began to go cold, and itch as if something began to eat at their skin. Narcissa smiled. With the dissolution of my marriage, Lord Sirius welcomed me back into the house, and shared with me our house magics. I think you will find House Black wards handle hostility rather more permanently than most. Rockwood had been an unspeakable, a master of magic, and researcher for the ministry before he became a Death Eater. He knew enough to understand that inside these wards, the Dark Lord or Dumbledore would be required to stand a chance against even a mediocre witch. The Black family witches had never been mediocre. "We will take our leave," Rockwood said. "I will have an elf escort you to the door. I am afraid our flu network and apparition wards react rather badly to the dark mark." They exchanged rather cold smiles at Narcissa's suggestion. Rockwood turned to face Narcissa before taking his leave. He bowed to her and said very softly, "You are as brave as you are beautiful. I shall prefer to remember you this way. The brave tend to have such ugly ends after all." Cruelty was a taste they all shared, so neither had any doubts that death would be a mercy should either fall to the other. They, of course, differed as to who they thought would fall to whom. After they left, Narcissa took Draco aside and sat him down. "Draco, your father's old friends are mobilizing. They are convinced the Dark Lord's return is imminent," Narcissa said softly. "Harry has been saying the same, and him I actually believe," Draco said and shrugged. He wasn't being brave. He simply took in the information and incorporated that into his plans as another data point. Narcissa felt an odd swelling of pride. She fought to keep her expression cold. She was no Hufflepuff to get huggy just because her offspring made her proud. That cheapened both of them. "Lord Black has invited all of us to attend the World Cup with him in a private box. Half the world will be there, and the other half will be waiting for word," Narcissa said, no expression on her face or any tone of urgency in her delivery. Sort of an obvious place to stage something flashy and terrifying. Given the sort of confusion and attack at something that large scale, it would be pretty easy to squeeze in an assassination or kidnapping if you knew it was coming. Since Father had more than a few auras and ministry drones on the payroll before, you can pretty much assume they will have full access to the site, and possibly some of the security actively aiding. Draco said, a slight smirk on his face. Narcissa looked at her son critically. "You are still planning on going?" Draco's smirk intensified. "Honestly, if they didn't attack soon, we were seriously contemplating putting an ad in the personal section calling for lonely Death Eaters looking for partners in casual public violence." Narcissa's expression grew pained. "You are spending too much time with your uncle. He is corrupting you." Draco blushed. He wasn't serious about the Vila cheerleader introductions. "At least, I don't think so." Narcissa collapsed back into her chair. She felt another Gryffindor headache coming on. It was a good thing Harry was the guiding force of their little coup, because even as their warlord Sirius couldn't take anything totally seriously. She took a look outside on the lawn and noticed one of her husband's beloved peacocks was not moving. No, it was petrified. Well now, children really do grow up so fast these days. Magic, it seemed, was clearly favoring rather quick development in Harry's little basilisks. The timing could not be better. She would have one of the elves prepare it. Set, her basilisk simply would not admit he could not swallow anything he could bring down. Draco had been the same with his chicken tenders. More than once she had to acquire chicken chunk right out of his throat before he turned blue. Snake or wizard, boys had no impulse control or survival instincts. What they had was Narcissa, and that was better. Game Day Quidditch World Cup Hermione was looking at Sirius Black's idea of a muggle tent. "I thought the idea was to be discreet, because this event is being held on Muggle lands," Hermione asked irritably. Sirius grinned. "Spectacular, isn't it? James and I went Muggle for 6 months back in 1979. Caught this thing called TB, like the Wizarding Wireless only with pictures. Kind of like a pensive for things that never happened. Brilliant idea. I saw this wonderful show. Muggles made it about one of their auras who lived with a kind of house elf, only also human. They had this camping scene, and actually got it right about stuff being bigger on the inside than out. Since Muggles already know about that kind of tent being bigger on the inside, then it can't be that much of a surprise, and won't be mistaken for magical." Harry, Millicent, and Neville were staring at it in awe. Remus was rubbing his face painfully. Narcissa looked mildly amused, but didn't really see the problem. The tent looked like a large pink and purple bottle with lots of gold filigree around the glasswork. Hermione's face was red, and she was clearly about to explode. "Sirius, was this show called I Dream of Jeannie?" Sirius looked impressed. "Trust a Muggle-born to be up on all the Muggle classics. Brilliant show. I made my tent based on her Ginny bottle, not the real ones, of course." Those bastards have to be sealed right and tight. They get grumpy if they get out, and they are a pain to banish. But the Muggle idea is swankier than half the brothels I've been in. Hermione lost it and punched Sirius in the arm. That isn't a real Muggle thing. They made it up for TV, and you only like that house elf because she was blonde, had huge boobs and almost no clothing. Muggle tents do not look like giant glass ginny bottles. Sirius looked offended. Yes, they do. I saw it on the telly, so it has to be true. Besides, mine is way better than James. His tent was a big blue box that said police call box on the outside. I just got out of Azkaban, and I am not camping in a police box, even if it is bigger on the inside. Remus looked up. Yeah, and when we used that one, James always made us call him Doctor for some reason. It made the most distressing noises when you portkeyed with it. Hermione banged her head into Sirius' shoulder in frustration. Your idea of a normal Muggle tent is a choice between I Dream of Jeannie and Doctor Who, she asked. Sirius gave her a thumbs up. Got my newt in Muggle studies. That was Lily's influence. Come to think of it, she made about the same faces Hermione is now. Witches be like that, I guess. Not natural campers. Millicent turned to Narcissa and stage whispered, how is he still alive, let alone with a reputation as a ladies' man if he is that clueless? Narcissa raised one eyebrow and looked at the slithering girl. Sirius Black really is as bad a decision as he looks. At a certain point in a girl's life, the urge to do something self-destructive with a boy who is everything your mother warned you to avoid will occur. Sirius Black is literally the checklist of everything a wise mother warns you against, and better than average at it. I honestly think James Potter won over Lily Evans in the end, because standing next to Sirius Black for years simply made James seem far more stable, well-adjusted, and mature than he really was, if only in comparison. Inside, the tent looked like a 1970s interpretation of an Arab harem done in pink flowing silks. It was somewhat beyond lavish, dipping deeply into sybaritic, hedonistic, decadent with a hint of cute that kept it from being outright offensive. It also had more rooms than some hotels. Remus stroked the walls and muttered, I remember these. Lily and I worked on them forever. Couldn't make it work with pure charms or runes, had to mix them both and with very careful arithmancy to keep the space expansion from interfering with the protection wards. There is even a werewolf cage that floods with psychedelics and mice. That was Sirius' idea. It made the change bearable, but I was tasting colors and seeing sounds for a week afterwards when I wasn't off in a corner having a good giggle. Neville looked shocked. You gave LSD to a werewolf. Sirius looked offended. Don't be silly. There is a rare mushroom that grows only on dragon dung that is far more potent than any Muggle drug. LSD won't even touch a werewolf. Of course the mushroom would kill a normal bloke, but I figured if you could make a troll stoned enough to dance, it could only help Moony when he got all furry and fighty. Harry patted Sirius on the shoulder. See, Neville, totally more responsible. Noodle slithered into the tent and disappeared into pink cushion-covered couches. From somewhere in the mass of silk and softness, a hiss emerged. This is acceptable. Mousegiver may wake me when silly hunting game for prey you can't eat starts. Hermione, Sirius, Remus, and Narcissa stayed in the tent. Neville, Draco, Millicent, and Harry went looking for other classmate Quidditch fanatics. Fred and George Weasley were the first they found, talking to Ludo Bagman, head of the Department of Magical Sport. They were looking shifty and gold was changing hands. Fred began. 100 galleons on Ireland to win, George continued, but Crumb to get the snitch. Ludo Bagman, current department head but former Wimbledon Wasp beater, grinned. You lads put too much stock in Crumb. The beaters of the Irish outclass the Bulgarians as much as their chasers do. No matter how good Crumb is, they won't let him near the snitch. So, began George, it's a bet, finished Fred. The three shook hands and parted. Draco smirked. Crumb will get the snitch. He's the best seeker in a century. He made the national team while still in school. He will win the whole thing for Bulgaria. Harry was shaking his head. Draco, Ludo, was right. Ask any beater here and they will tell you Bulgaria doesn't belong on the same pitch as the Irish. Outside of Crumb, they are totally outclassed. In the pro leagues, the snitch is twice as fast as in school games and gets a big head start. The way the Irish run up the score when they are on a tier, it won't be an hour before who gets the snitch won't matter. Millicent looked between the two of them and shook her head. She knew how it worked in the professional leagues, but World Cup finals were as far above standard league play as league play was above Hogwarts House Cup play. She would wait and see. Draco picked up a Bulgarian hat, so all the Weasleys had to put on Irish hats. Harry took an Irish pin, but Neville took a Bulgarian, as he had a crumb poster in his room at home. Millicent refused to pick a side, preferring to let the teams impress her before she decided who to cheer for. There were better than 100,000 witches and wizards from all over the world present, which was a number that boggled all of their minds. The stadium itself looked like a cross between the Roman Colosseum and the Weasleys' infamous Burrow. It rose like a huge cup whose edges soared high like Muggle skyscrapers. By any rational standard, it should not be possible to build that high with that little support. Millicent looked at the structure and felt the power of the wards built into it, just to keep it upright. There was enough power invested in this structure to rebuild a Muggle city after a major quake or flood, and it was poured into a building that would be up for less than 1 week. She shook her head. This level of conspicuous consumption, when the budgets for auras and healers got cut every budget for austerity, made her almost cross over to Hermione's socialism. Not all the way. She still favored rule of oligarchs. The common rabble would vote trolls into office if they promised lower taxes, but clearly a wiser crop of oligarchs was needed. The magic of the place made all of them grin like idiots. 100,000 cheering fans gave an energy to the place that would have dementors and boggarts skittering for the far horizon. Magic reacted to the excitement and joy, and the land sang with it. They were getting drunk of the magic, as any of the fans were getting from the Irish whiskey and Bulgarian rakia being free-poured into any container that looked even partially empty. When the time came to head up to their boxes, they ran into Ludo Bagman looking quite nervous. "I say, Sirius, old chap, you speak Bulgarian, don't you?" Ludo asked urgently. Sirius laughed. "You know I do. Spent 6 months in that Vila enclave recovering from stopping that Death Eater attack on them. 1 month recovering from the curse, and 5 months recovering from the thank you. By the end, I was quite a cunning linguist," Sirius said, waggling his eyebrows suggestively. Hermione made gagging noises. Harry and Draco grinned. Neville blushed. Narcissa administered a slap to the back of his head. Millicent and Remus just rolled their eyes. Ludo clasped both Sirius' hands in his. "Thing is serious, old bean." Barty was supposed to be playing translator. "The old goat knows every language under the sun, so I never really planned on a backup, but the silly sard has wandered off. Just his house elf, and an empty seat saved for him. I have the Bulgarian Minister for Magic as my guest. I need him happy, as we still have to work together on the whole Triwizard thing and really need a translator." Sirius grinned. Barty Crouch SR had been the one to shuffle him off to Azkaban without a trial. Any chance to make him look bad before the world while doing a good deed was too good to pass up. "Ludo, my friend, never let it be said that Sirius Black failed to step up for England. Harry and I will come join you in the minister's box. If old Barty ever bothers to show up, we can just head back to ours. If he doesn't, we will keep your minister all happy and chatty during the game," Sirius said, not missing the chance to get Harry a meeting with a powerful international official. In the times ahead, he would need name recognition and respect from figures all around magical Europe if he was going to be listened to. Narcissa smiled, happy to see Sirius actually doing his job as a proper Lord Black, building connections and favors with those who could be of use in the days ahead. She smiled and patted Sirius' elbow as she shepherded the rest of the kids and Remus off to the black box. When the game started, Cornelius Fudge, as Minister of Magic, gave a short enough speech not to draw boos, and cast a powerful fireworks charm to signal the start. The Irish charged onto the pitch almost before the flare faded. They trailed a single color each behind their brooms, but wove amongst themselves to create a twisting rainbow that circled the stadium. Harry was shocked to find that his omnioculars were no help in tracking them, as they moved too fast to both track them and keep them in the picture at any magnification. He prided himself on being a good flyer, but the Irish were moving so fast and so close to each other it made him flinch just watching. The Irish mascots came out. Leprechauns came and danced in the air, their fairy gold falling into the stands, as they danced their mad jigs and reels upon the rainbows the Irish flyers wove. Harry knew the leprechauns were an old fairy race left behind when the Tuatha De Danann, the Sidhe, the true elves turned sideways from the world and left it to humans when humanity's cold iron threatened to wipe them out. Taking one of the falling golden coins, he tested it against the iron of his dagger sheath, and it dissolved into dust. Fairy gold, like the magic of the lesser fairies, failed at the touch of iron. The true elf magic didn't, but iron could make wounds on them that healed as slowly as cursed wounds on a wizard. The elder fae had not fled before human magic, but human metal, a fact that was not dwelled upon in magical history or muggle studies. That might undermine the somewhat wizard supremacist view of magical history. Sirius had joked that wizards named the lesser servants of the Sidhe, house elves, to mock and degrade the magical race that had vied with humanity for power all through the stone, copper, and bronze ages, only to flee before the coming of iron. Oddly, the elves turning sideways from the world and leaving mirrored the wizards fleeing at the statue of secrecy, as if the unity of humanity could not last more than a few centuries past the passing of the magical rival race. The races the elves left behind were not particularly well treated by wizards, including the goblins. The Bulgarians burst onto the pitch. They flew in a static formation, with only one figure weaving through them in defiance of their static formation. Harry, for the first time, appreciated Draco's impression of Crumb, for it could be no other. He treated the rest of his team like static goalposts. He moved past them so swiftly they may as well have been standing still. Harry felt his palm itch. The challenge to see if Crumb could be caught by a bludger suddenly made his blood boil. Boiling blood was about to be a common problem as the Bulgarian mascots came out. The Vila cheerleaders were amazing acrobats, making human cheerleaders look like draft oxen, and their beauty was a little too perfect to be truly human. Harry could feel the power of their allure as the Vila consciously put their power behind the natural charm. It slid across the coils and scales of Harry's mind like most charms did. The parcel magic woven into his occlumency by Noodle's training made him barely perceive the pressure of the charm. The same could not be said for most of the wizards in the crowd. The charge for the railing was embarrassing for many. Harry noticed the Bulgarian minister giving Harry a surprised look as the young boy resisted the charm of the Vila as if it was nothing. Sirius shot Harry a wink, and the Bulgarian minister and Sirius launched into a discussion of Vila. Each had known that Harry was pretty sure he was better off not understanding, at least from the recognizable hand gestures each made at various points. When the game started, the magic of the stadium began to impress Harry in a way Hogwarts could not. The stadium had magic worked into it so that every seat had a view that was magically enhanced to be nearly the equivalent to being goal-post level midfield. It was one of those quiet marvels of magic that made the game happen so close you felt you could reach out and touch it. Hermione was lost. Quidditch was a game for jocks, a waste of wizarding potential, a trivializing of magic and the intelligence that it demanded. This had been her truth all through school, since discovering the game and watching otherwise intelligent witches and wizards forsake the wand for the club and chase little murder balls through the sky. Intellectual honesty is a keystone of her existence, so as much as it pained her, she had to admit she had been wrong. Luna had been happily providing the play-by-play in a very Luna way, but Luna did not describe the play that was happening. Luna described what was going to happen next. The big Bulgarian has the quaffle, but the blonde Irishman is about to fake diving for it to make him speed up. Poor boy doesn't notice the Irish seeker diving past the Bulgarian beater. Luna cheered. But why? Demanded Hermione, only to see it play out before her. The Irish seeker drew a bludger attack that the seeker sloth rolled out from under, passing beneath his broom as the bludger shot neatly onto the Irish beater's bat. The bludger came exactly opposite the angle the Bulgarian chaser was looking to avoid the Irish seeker he had sped up to dodge. In a burst of speed, looking over his left shoulder, he missed the bludger, only his burst of speed put him in the path of. It struck his right side, and the bludger blasted the quaffle right into the hands of the second Irish chaser, who drove in a straight sprint for the Bulgarian goal. the other two Bulgarian chasers converging to squeeze him out, only to find he dropped the bludger mid-air to the original Irish chaser, who had been accelerating this whole time from farther back, and caught the quaffle at a speed neither the two chasers nor the keeper, who had already committed to the right low goal, could correct, as the chaser released the quaffle like a comet through the center top goal. Luna smiled. All warfare is based on deception. Hermione blinked. That is Sun Tzu. How did you read that? It's Muggle. Luna blinked back. I'm Ravenclaw. We read everything. Besides, Sun Tzu had and used wizards when he went to war. Magic is shaped by runes, arithmancy, incantation, and seal. It is all about patterns. Nature is about patterns. War is about patterns. Words are patterns we use to make sense of all the other patterns around us. Quidditch is about making patterns. Hermione blushed, unused to being taken to school even by her professors. Luna did not know or care that she had just proved casually to Hermione that she saw and understood things the oft-touted brightest witch in her generation had missed. Luna was the truth of Ravenclaw, not the imitation. Her eyes were wide with wonder, her mind lost in the pure joy of knowledge and its sharing. Ego was a thing she didn't really understand. It was dull and smooth. It lacked sharp edges and sparkle the way new patterns did, so she didn't use it much. Sparkly. Luna cheered and happily described how the Irish chasers made patterns the Bulgarian chasers and beaters tried to break up, but missed the pattern the Irish were needing the Bulgarians to make. It didn't matter how fast the Bulgarians were or how strong. This was a dance, this was a war, and the Irish were leading because they had called the tune, and only they could hear the music. War was based on deception, and only the Irish and one Ravenclaw girl saw the truth. The Bulgarians fell behind with the steady beat of a metronome. Hermione's brain was working overtime as she tuned out the chaos of the individual actions and let her eyes unfocus. Unfocused like Luna was always unfocused. Unfocused from the detail to take in the shape, to see the pattern, to see not what they were doing, but what they were making. Bugger, swore Hermione as she saw it. The Irish seeker pulled a Ransky feint, diving like a falcon for the ground as if after a snitch. Victor Crumb called out to his team to ignore it, the frustration on his young face like the rage of a dragon. But his team, all older and more experienced, ignored him. The Bulgarian chaser swerved to accidentally cross the Irish seeker's path to force him to veer off the snitch. He presumed the seeker was near to catching. In veering away, he missed the pass from his wingmate, who was being pressed for the quaffle by another Irish seeker. The quaffle was caught by an Irish seeker who dove between two bludgers, blasted by the Irish, that caused the remaining Bulgarian beater to pull up rather than get smashed. The Irish beaters had crossed bludgers in front of the Bulgarian chaser, so the bludgers each ended up on the bat of the other Irish beater, who directed them at the Bulgarian keeper. The Bulgarian beaters dove for the bludgers, and one of them made it. The keeper had to wait to commit to the quaffle until he knew which of the bludgers would be blocked. Moving late, he showed all the brilliance you could expect from a keeper in the World Cup and actually got 2 fingers on the quaffle. He caused it to wobble and hit the ring, but still passed through. Hermione looked over at the Gryffindor idiots, at Neville, the simple quiet boy, and at Millicent, the Amazonian Slytherin. Poor ignorant witch and wizards who were wasting their time using bats rather than wands in a stupid game, and ignoring the miracle of magic. They all had the hungry gaze of predators watching the hunt. They breathed as one, their eyes tracking, flicking ahead to where the next piece of the pattern would be. No, must be. They didn't know like Luna, but they felt it. They had given themselves so fully to it with muscle and training, with instinct and battle that they too could sense where each ball and flyer must be. All warfare is based on deception, Hermione said slowly. And Quidditch is war, cheered Luna, waving her Irish flag as the Irish keeper moved casually to block the goal as Hermione, Luna, and the Irish team all knew, and trusted that the diving Irish chaser, who was moving too fast to maneuver to catch the Bulgarian chaser with the quaffle, could only be dodged by moving low left. And with his right hand, the chaser would have to cast up and right in passing to hit the remaining ring. The keeper moved just fast enough to have his entire body converge with the shot, his eyes ignoring the quaffle itself to track his own chasers who he hit with a pass before the Bulgarians knew they missed the shot. Luna spread her arms. Can you feel it? Magic loves this game. Chaos and patterns, creation and destruction, flowers of blood and sweat dancing in the air. War without killing. Practice for the other war, the one that comes tonight. Hermione shuddered as she felt Luna offer casually a prophesy, not that she saw it as a prophesy. The Ravenclaw girl just opened her eyes wider than anyone else. Her mind never dismissed a pattern as impossible. She embraced the unreal as well as the real, and thus saw patterns no one else could. Hermione was Muggle-born and kicked herself again. Unreal in the Muggle world meant false. Magic, the real and unreal, were woven together to make the universe, and at the fundamental level, witches and wizards used the unreal to reshape reality. Just because what Luna talked about frequently wasn't real didn't mean it wasn't right. Hermione hated being the last to understand. In frustration, she looked up at the sky to see Victor Crumb snarl and tear across the field. His face was rage and pride and power. He could not save his team, he could not win his war, but he could end it. The Irish seeker dove after him, older, wiser, far more experienced, and in every way that counted better. Every way but one. Victor Crumb was magic on a broom. Hermione felt her heart soar and sing. One man, one boy, put his will against the whole world. 100,000 screaming witches and wizards willed an Irish victory. The whole world bent to their will to make this pattern that they wove a reality. Victor Crumb could not take the thread from their hands and weave it otherwise. Was one boy on a broom. He could not weave anything. He was a knife, a terrible, swift blade, and he could end things. The snitch was ahead of him, between him and the Irish seeker, about to cut 90 degrees away from Crumb and towards the Irish seeker. Crumb turned hard and kicked off his broom. The Irish seeker was moving too fast to process what he saw. Victor Crumb turned directly in front of him. Instinct made him break, as Crumb's broom passed beneath him and his body leaped over top of him. Crumb knew his broom would fly straight and starting to fall without power for several seconds before the safety charms triggered to lower it to the ground. He also knew that his tightly corded and muscular body would fall faster. He knew where his broom would be, so he kept his eyes only on the snitch. It tried to dodge again, this time up, but Victor's hand flashed faster than any saber and cut it from the air with a practiced snatch. This left him off center for his broom, as the lunge for the snitch caused him to pass beside rather than fall onto his broom. Victor did not care. Catching it with his left as he passed, he leaned forward into a dive, trusting his heavier weight to make his body lead the dive. Once falling like a star, he rolled onto his broom and pulled up, thrusting his fist defiantly into the air, golden snitch, waving its wings helplessly in defeat. Ireland had won, 170-160, having held the Bulgarians to a paltry 1 goal, but Victor had stopped the match at defeat, and before humiliation. Hermione joined Luna and Draco in jumping to her feet and screaming, "Crumb! Crumb! Crumb!" She had seen the Irish make magic in the sky, weaving together a tapestry of will, grace, and power she could only barely grasp and could never be part of. She had seen them make a magic no one could possibly oppose, and one man, one boy, had dared to put his will and hand against it. Bulgaria had lost. They had never stood a chance, but Victor Crumb put his will against the world and made it stop. That was magic. Hermione turned to Luna and hugged her. That was beautiful. Luna hugged her back. Hold on to this feeling. Tonight will be ugly. You cannot weave this much light and cast no shadow. In the Ministry of Magic Box Sirius and the Bulgarian minister were chatting, laughing, shouting and cursing as the game wore on. The Bulgarian minister kept passing a flask back and forth between them that held something that made Harry's eyes water. First, Harry thought that Noodle didn't like the smell of whatever rakia was, because he slithered off Harry's shoulder and moved between them and the house elf sitting by the empty seat, saved for Barty Crouch, SR of the Department of Internation Cooperation. Noodle rose to his fighting height and began to sway back and forth. The house elf eyed the snake warily, but when their eyes met, the elf shuddered and went still. For a few seconds, Noodle was in the house elf's mind, then something unseen but present passed between them and blocked Noodle's eyes. The house elf cast its eyes to the ground and peeked back at Noodle fearfully. "Darla, what are you looking at, Noodle?" Harry hissed. "The game is this way," Harry said, pointing at the finest Quidditch match Harry had ever seen. "The chase with prey you cannot eat is of no interest. I prefer prey I can eat," Noodle said. Harry caught the tone, his wand snapping into his hand from its wrist sheath and his senses coming alive. "What do you see?" Harry asked. "There is nothing to see," replied Noodle truthfully if unhelpfully. Just then the crowd cheered again. "Oh, bugger, the Irish scored again. The game's out of reach now. Even the snitch won't save them," Harry swore, turning his eyes back to the game. Ludo Bagman began to swear like the beater he was, taking comfort in the fact the Bulgarian minister couldn't hear him. Crumb had caught the snitch in time to save every game this tournament. Ludo had bet 1,000 galleons the Bulgarians would win. He got 6-1 odds, enough gold to get him out of debt. Rumors that Augustus Rockwood had been a Death Eater were most likely false, but the bugger was not one to cross. Now that the Bulgarians were going to lose, Bagman owed Rockwood a debt he could not hope to pay. His distraction on his betting woes and the undoubted mixed feelings when Crumb caught the snitch all contributed to his missing the feeling of an invisible hand sliding his wand from its waist sheath. Only one house elf and one rock viper saw it, and only the house elf looked terrified. Noodle watched the saggy loser of a wizard have his wand stolen by the one who smelled like Barty Crouch, and yet not like Barty Crouch, who hid under the invisibility cloak by the house elf. Why a wizard would want a wand that didn't fit them, he did not know. Noodle did not use a wand for magic, not that he could do much beyond mind magic, invisibility and warming charms, but what else did he need? If the almost Crouch had tried to steal Harry's wand, or even moved closer while invisible, Noodle would have killed him, of course. Harry and any number of others would probably give him the killing people is wrong speech again, but Mouse Giver understood. Some people smelled wrong. Traitors, murderers. If they came around his speaker or Mouse Giver, Noodle would just kill them first, and let the human auras get the petty details about what terrible thing the wise and knowing reptile had stopped. It was, after all, the only use Noodle had ever found for auras. 46. Chapter 46, Death Eaters. The after-party in the pink party palace that was Sirius, Party Pad, from the 1970s was honestly almost restrained compared to some of the Irish fan parties, the Bulgarian Crumb celebrations, the Pan-African we don't have to clean up or fly home party, or the Brazilian-hosted dance party that were raging at different parts of the huge field that the poor Muggle caretakers had been oblivated 100 times to not notice had been expanded from a normal campground to roughly the size of the city of Rome during the Republic. They were hosting the Weasleys because a sulking Fred and George had discovered that Ludo Bagman was not actually able to cover the bet they had made with him and needed a bit of cheering up. Sirius thought Arthur needed some Marley-free time to loosen up. Narcissa had her wand ready to either put out fires or hose down, and overexcited Sirius, she wasn't sure which. Luna had stopped singing along and gone quiet. Her eyes began to tear. Narcissa looked on with something like horror as her Draco crossed the room in half a dozen steps to take her hand and whisper quietly to her. He shifted into hugging her and began to talk to her first tenderly, and then Narcissa watched her son's face shift from the caring boy she still couldn't believe he was, to the cold-blooded killer she had recently divorced. Draco's face became hard plains. His aristocratic features took on the cold mask of unfeeling iron that her husband had worn when he killed. Draco and Luna rose. Noodle locked eyes with Luna, who hissed something at him. The snake simply slithered to Harry, who had been dancing with Hermione to the latest Weird Sisters single. The two of them stopped and turned to face Draco and Luna. The sounds of screaming came from outside, and Sirius laughed softly. Looks like the Irish are overdoing it again. Remus Lupin was a werewolf, and his senses stretched beyond the merely human, whatever he tried to pretend. He spoke softly. That isn't the Irish. Someone just screamed, Death Eater. Narcissa's blood went cold. She had never been on a raid, but her ex-husband's laughing description of the shock and horror of a massed Death Eater attack taught her to expect panic and helplessness. The auras had always been useless, and the Order of the Phoenix frequently arrived soon enough to limit the damage. But the dark mark in the sky blocked apparition and portkeys other than via the dark mark branded Death Eaters. When they struck, the Death Eaters were predators trapped alone with terrified prey. Sirius Black was a godfather, which he took seriously. His first instinct had been to charge into battle as the aura and hit wizard he used to be, but he overrode that. He was Harry's godfather, and these kids were his responsibility. Right then, let's get everyone up. We move to the apparition point and get out. Let the auras handle it, he said, false smile on his face. Harry had his knife in one hand. He tested the edge and looked to Neville. Neville was checking inside his potions belt to make sure every plant and potion he had prepared was in place. Hermione checked the chamber on her Walther PPK, slid it into place in her potions belt, then made sure she had memorized where the attack, escape, and defense potions were located before nodding. Millicent was grinning, her wand in her hand and her shoulders slanting forward like a sprinter in the blocks, ready for the opening gun to charge forward. Luna tucked her wand behind her ear and kissed Draco's cheek before putting on what the Ravenclaw obviously patterned after Hermione's serious face. The two Weasleys were rummaging through their bags to fill pockets with odds and ends, laughing madly and high-fiving when they found bits they just now thought of a use for. "Harry, what do you kids think you are doing?" Sirius asked in his best responsible adult voice. "They killed my mother, my father, tortured Neville's until they were nearly dead, tried for Millicent, tried for Draco, tried for me. This time they put on their pretty robes and masks. They went and put on uniforms, so I guess it's time we taught them how goblins go to war," Harry said, Noodle at his side hissing wordlessly, fangs out. Narcissa turned to the Weasley twins. "Your tricks won't work. Lucius told me the Death Eater mask isn't just to hide them. It detects illusions and invisibility, and it acts as the only portkey that can function beneath the dark mark." "Detects illusions," said Fred happily. "Brilliant," agreed George as they high-fived again before giving Narcissa a thumbs up. Narcissa turned to her son. "Draco, these are Death Eaters. Each of them is far stronger and more experienced than you. If you fight them, you will die." Noodle hissed angrily. "We do not fight. Mammals and idiots fight. We hunt." "You call them Death Eaters. All I smell is prey." Narcissa looked at the room around her. Outside of Remus and herself, who looked properly terrified, the wide white-toothed grins flashing back at her could well have been from so many goblins or great white sharks. Even her little Draco did not look like some terrified child or dewy-eyed would-be hero. He looked like a dragon about to hunt. Sirius laughed. "Well, I was always shite at being the reasonable one. This isn't a duel, and this isn't school. If they have a chance to see you, they will kill you. Don't play fair, don't be seen, and don't bother stunning. Death Eaters succeed because they create panic and confusion. They don't care who they kill, they just want to spread fear, so they are going to move fast and hit hard. Don't talk, don't challenge, don't stun. Remember, you can't shield against unforgivables. March to the sound of the screaming and don't die." He led them from the tent, wand in hand, and went to war. Sirius Black and Remus Lupin went to war for the second time, and this time it was Narcissa Black who guarded their backs. Harry hissed his commands in parcel tongue as they approached the fires. "Dollar Mouse Giver into the fires. Water Witch into the big tent area. Root Singer into the woods. Noodle with me." Harry hissed, his mind already working. He pulled his invisibility cloak around himself. The cloak was one of the Deathly Hallows, a Potter treasure inherited from the Peverils. A cloak that could hide even from death. It would hide him from Death Eaters. Noodle's own invisibility would not hide him, but a black snake in the grass in a night split with fire and screams was hard to see even without it. He saw the Death Eaters. They had a Muggle family suspended in mid-air. They strode in their hoods and masks, driving screaming witches and wizards before them with the mere fear of their coming. They cast cutting and blood-boiling curses, leaving screaming victims to left and right as they set tents on fire as they passed. Everywhere they strode, death followed. Some dared to stand, but as they cast their shield charms and tossed their stunners and disarming spells, bolts of jagged green light lanced back. "Avada Kedavra," Harry heard again and again as he remembered the deaths of his mother and father, relived through so many nightmares. Harry was no baby this time. He crouched behind a tent, waited until the Death Eater passed, and drove his goblin silver knife into his liver, and twisted. The Death Eater spasmed and started to fall, and Harry cut his throat calmly. He heard, rather than saw, a second Death Eater cry out as he noticed his partner being butchered. Harry slid back inside his cloak and fell to the ground and rolled as a powerful blasting curse struck where he was. A black rope of nightmare flashed beside him, and the ground where it struck boiled into ooze as the curse the Death Eater threw. Harry didn't see the strike, but the Death Eater, cursing him, suddenly screamed and grabbed his leg. His scream turned into a gurgle before he hit the ground and began thrashing. Harry noticed that Noodle's venom continued to grow stronger as Harry's magical power increased. It must be part of their familiar bond. Invisible, he moved through fire and chaos, seeking those who wished to eat death. He had so much to feed them. Hermione's path, Hermione Jean Granger, was not a fighter. She was a witch. Magic and the knowledge it offered her of the fundamental building blocks of the universe, of the true nature of reality that lay beyond and beneath the veil of science, were what drew her. She had learned about the Wiccans and the great British magical revival of the 1960s. They got it wrong, of course. Muggles always did. Still, she had secretly in her heart of hearts thought the ideal of an harm none, do as thou wilt, was a creed she could live by, a proper creed for witches. She stepped into the burning tents and saw an old man whose legs had been cut off. He was burned to death along with the child he had tried to shield with his life. She didn't even have to think, for fire would not harm her, would not touch her unless she willed it. Fire was hers, and she belonged to fire. She looked down at the burned corpse of what looked like grandfather and grandchild, now so burned she could not tell if it had been boy or girl. And harm none, do as thou wilt. That was the code of a good witch. That was less restrictive even than the code Dumbledore was always preaching about second chances and the sacredness of all life, even your enemies. Hermione looked at how the skull seemed to have frozen into a scream before the flesh finished cooking. She stood in a firestorm of burning tents and saw Death Eaters deliberately warding the entrance to a burning tent, trapping those inside. Knowing that when the tent had burned enough, the spatial expansion charms would fail, and the family inside would be crushed to death. The Death Eaters could have killed them swiftly, but they chose to make them die slowly by fire or collapsing space simply for their amusement. Good witches do not kill. Hermione sighed. I am not that kind of witch. She reached out to fire and sang to it. There was no spell, no incantation. She sang in Parseltongue to the fires the Death Eaters had lit. She sang to the souls of the dead and dying. She sang to magic and the night. They answered, and the fire flowed into a serpent of red flame that crawled through the tents, seeking those in masks and Death Eater robes. This night, refrain. Every night and a lair, fire and fleet and candlelight, refrain, and magic take thy soul. When thou from Hogwarts Hall art past, refrain. Every night and a lair from Founder's words thy way is lost. Refrain, and magic take thy soul. If ever thou bore the darkest mark, refrain. Every night and a lair taint thy gift with cruelest work. Refrain, and magic take thy soul. If ever thou gavest magic or gold, refrain. Every night and a lair the fire soul surely make thee shrink. Refrain, and magic take thy soul. That darkest mark on arm and soul, refrain. Every night and a lair to dragon's fire thou calm'st at last. Refrain, and magic take thy soul. That deathless one who serpents speak, refrain. Every night and a lair shall serpent's meal himself become, refrain, and magic take thy soul. This night, refrain. Every night and a lair, fire and fleet and candlelight, refrain, and magic take thy soul. The Witch of Fire strode through a nightmare of burning tents, and where she walked, twisted corpses of Death Eaters fell. When her magic had been exhausted, she fell unconscious into the wreckage of a burning tent, and fire cloaked her in scarlet feathers, like a phoenix brooding in its nest. Millicent Bulstrode, Fred and George Weasley Millicent walked to the well and reached down with her power. She called upon the water in the well, the water in the air, and she began to chant. She felt the runes in her body burn ice cold as she called upon the first mist, the icy primordial mist of Ginnungagap, and pushed her power into it. The mist was no common fog, for it was the primal mists of creation, the mists of the chaos before form. It was the reality before the reality, the stillness and silence before and after all creation. It was cold as a bitch and spooky with it. It drank sound and light, twisted magic as its unreality. Its chaos nibbled at the order of wanded magic, and unwove it like a sugar cube dropped in tea. Magic, sight, sound, all bent and twisted oddly in the fog, so that the mighty Death Eaters who chased their running prey into it suddenly found themselves without targets. The Death Eater mask caused all illusions to glow green, so they could not be fooled by those seeking to imitate the Death Eater regalia to survive the attack, nor could common disillusionment or invisibility cloaks save them. This fog, however, sank claws of ice into their bones and surrounded them with half-seen phantasms, where every casual thought became almost real. The six of them moved as a squad. They had been 8 once, but one was dead, having crossed wands with Alistair Moody, who did not do arrests, and one in Azkaban for crossing James Potter, who did. Still, they had been a well-honed machine in the war, and the so-called witches and wizards were still less than cattle. They barely qualified as sheep, so easily did they panic and run before their betters. Rosier snarled. Someone was creating this fog. He would find them and he would kill them. Split up. Find whoever is casting this damned fog and kill them, Rosier demanded. How in the hell do we know who is casting this? I don't even know what it is, and I am a Merlin be damned charms master, snarled Corbin Yaxley, overthinking things as bookworms usually did. Kill anyone who isn't a Death Eater. When the fog stops, you found them, pointed our Rosier. He didn't know why Malfoy and Rockwood always overcomplicated things. Just kill until no one else is left, and the problem is solved. That is how they almost won the last time. Freaking Potter had to screw it up. This time they would get it right, finish the job. The Dark Lord was returning. His dark mark burned. Rosier would be among the faithful who were rewarded. He would be raised up while those idiots who waited for their Dark Lord's summons to act would be punished. All they had to do was kill whoever was making this fog. Then they could teach the wizarding world the Death Eaters were back, and the Dark Lord is rising. They split up. A voice popped up to his left. Hello, Rosier turned and fired off a silent, cutting curse, but the figure was already gone. That wasn't, said the voice again, this time to his right. He cursed again, this time a whip of black magic that would slowly boil the victim's blood, but no one was there to strike. Very friendly now behind him. He spun, putting up a strong shield, Protego Maximus. He roared as a golden shield sprang to life, power intensive, but would block anything but the unforgivable. He heard the chanting and felt some magic touch his shield, not trying to penetrate it, but laying on top of it like paint. He turned to face the shape he saw moving to approach him. It too had a glowing shield around it. No, Rosier almost missed it. The Death Eater walking towards him glowed green. The Death Eater was under an illusion, an enemy. His wand snapped up and he began to chant. Avada Kedavra, he screamed, and the other figure matched him. The two unforgivable curses crossed, and 2 Death Eaters fell dead, their shields dissolving without a living will to hold them. The illusion in the Death Eater regalia stood in place where the 2 wizards had been. 2 illusions of the exact reality under the shield. 2 illusions detected by paranoid Death Eaters that proceeded to murder each other, not realizing the body beneath the illusion looked the exact same as the illusion. That was, said George, a bit violent, concluded Fred. Oh well, mused Fred, next one. Suggested George, moving through the fog of mists and madness. 2 Gryffindor lions hunted Death Eaters. Their only weapons were illusions their targets could obviously detect as illusions. That they worked anyway made it the most excellent prank. As long as Millicent could hold the mist and fill it with her magic, the Weasley boys would make sure these Death Eaters only got to hunt each other. The Vila cheerleaders were herding and protecting a group of children. The allure of the Vila made them natural babysitters. As with small children, the effect wasn't sexual, but rather gave children an instinctive urge to listen to the Vila. The Bulgarian contingent had a dozen Vila protecting about 60 children when the Death Eater attack started, but both the children and the Vila had been high-priority targets for the Death Eaters. The Vila were herding their children towards the trees, hoping to get out of the endless confusion of the tents, and back into the wild they felt comfortable in to hide the children. The Death Eaters had no intention of letting them succeed. Avada Kedavra. A Death Eater shouted, and a green beam struck a Vila, dropping her to the ground. Incendio, another Vila shouted, her wand directing a fireball enhanced with all her race's fire magic to blast back at the Death Eater, but his body turned to black fog and flowed around the blast to appear beside her. Crucio, he sneered, and a blood-red bar connected her to his wand, and she screamed in pain beyond pain and collapsed. The children were all screaming now. Suddenly a voice sang from behind them, a light soprano, not filled with terror or defiance, but a happy, joyful song that had no place on a battlefield. The Death Eaters turned, Butterfly, butterfly, whence do you come? I know not, I ask not, nor ever had a home. Butterfly, butterfly, where do you go? Where the sun shines, and where the buds grow. Luna Lovegood sang and danced, her wand waving, slicing through the pattern of charm after charm as she blasted a stream of butterflies from her wand, thousands of butterflies made of light. They shone similar to a patroness, but they burned when they touched the Death Eaters. Not enough to kill, but enough to disrupt their thoughts, their movements, and their spells. Crucio. The unforgivable lanced out from the wand of one of the Death Eaters, but Luna danced and wove with her eyes focused on a world only she could see as she sang to magic, and magic sang back. She danced with magic, but Luna always let magic lead. Reducto, Defindo, Avada Kedavra. The curses lashed at her, but the whirl of butterfly drank most of the spells, only the unforgivables cutting through, but Luna was lost in the dance, and magic was not done with her yet. Draco crawled on his belly without any shade of pride. He hissed softly, but too loud to his own ears. 1 second's notice would be all it took to blot out his life. He was no Gryffindor, he had no death wish. Well, not his death anyway. Serpent Sorcia, he chanted again and again. The serpents summoned using parcel magic were both more potent and more vicious. He recognized them as Black Mamba, the fastest snake on earth, and one of the most deadly. They knifed through the long English grass like they were starving, and Death Eaters were the last food. The first screams were not long in coming. Luna had lost herself in the dance and tripped to fall in an unseen ditch. He hoped she had the sense to stay down. She had to be almost out of magic, and the Death Eaters only had to be close with some of the spells they were tossing around. The Death Eaters realized the grass was full of death, and their targets had made the tree line. With a snarl, they turned to black fog and apparated to the tree line. Draco slumped down, content to go look at the one who his snake seemed to have killed. He should check to find out who he was and see if he bore any instructions. It would be stupid, but his father always complained about how the burn after reading so often got ignored by at least one idiot. He supposed normal people didn't grow up learning how Death Eaters practiced human relations and conducted after massacre critiques. Draco was happy Luna didn't judge him for what he could share, and Harry was more than half goblin and loved any stolen information. He just hated feeling ashamed every time he shared what he knew, not enough to send his friends in without what he could give, but sometimes he wished he had a Hufflepuff childhood. Then Draco heard the first screams from the forest. Deep, manly screams. Honestly, what kind of idiot followed women and children into a forest protected by Neville Longbottom with intent to rape and murder? Neville was the ultimate Hufflepuff. He turned what ought to be considered a nightmare of fang and claw into the ultimate cuddle badger. Draco should be allowed to sneer at him, but the screams had turned to sobs and broken wet sounds of flesh being torn. No. Only an idiot followed Neville Longbottom, the root singer, the lord of the forest, into the woods with intent to harm defenseless women and children. Draco nudged the dead Death Eater. Hey, moron, you got lucky. Never let the Hufflepuffs get you. Draco pulled down the mask. Walden McNair, the Department of Magical Creatures pet executioner, and I killed you with a magical creature. I am either going to laugh at that or need serious therapy. Either way, I am not going into those woods to see what Longbottom did to the rest of them. After a while, the surviving Vila came out, supporting the one who had been tortured. The children were laughing and giggling. One of the very small ones was riding a very large badger with pink bows braided into his hair. Looking past the cuddle badger and his flock of rescued children, he swore he could see 9 different bodies impaled by and on the trees of the deep forest when the bushes at the forest edge literally bent out of Neville's way as he led the children out. Draco shuddered. Hufflepuffs. They were all smiles and group hugs until the killing started. Then they could make a good Slytherin get the chills. Luna had risen from the ditch and was complimenting Neville on his pretty bows. Draco realized he was drawing odd looks from the Vila. Ah yes, still sitting on a dead Death Eater. Bad form that. Getting up, Draco cast a spell to create an illusion of grass over the body. Wouldn't do to scare the children at this point. He was definitely going to need therapy. Much as it pained him, he was going to have to ask Granger for her contact. Sirius and the grown-ups, there was a battle going on, and Sirius was marching to the sound of the wands, as his aura training told him to. Remus Lupin was at his side as always, and this time he had Harry rather than James backing him up, but close enough. He had traded that rat Pettigrew for that bitch Narcissa, which he supposed was an upgrade, but once again the marauders were going to war. "Stay close to me, Harry, and let us do most of the fighting," Sirius said as they approached the battle. "He left you right after the tent, sent all the other children to hunt Death Eaters, assigned them sweep zones like an actual officer. It was almost stirring if he hadn't sent my only son off to hunt the deadliest wizards on Earth," Narcissa said softly, her eyes never stopping moving. "I told him to stay with us," snarled Sirius. "Did you ever listen?" argued Remus, reasonably. "That was different," shouted Sirius. The three theoretical adults ran into a running battle between 8 Death Eaters and what was left of the Irish minister's Aura team. 4 Auras were down, and all Death Eaters were still on their feet. A killing curse flashed at Sirius, but Remus had already transfigured a fist of earth to rise up and block the deadly beam. Narcissa swept a powerful protego around them to protect from the fragments, but Sirius had his wand moving in a whip-like motion as he hissed in the parcel tongue that worked entirely too well with the black family magic. A whip of black fire slashed from his wand and wrapped around 2 Death Eaters. With a flick, Sirius pulled it back, and they were both cut deeply, one losing his left arm, and all the flesh the whip had touched burned now with black fire that ate the tissues around and under it. The Death Eaters reacted to the slow and painful killing of 2 of their own by splitting. 3 stayed on the Auras and Irish minister, and 3 on Sirius and crew. The lead figure of the Death Eaters moved fast for a big man, and his curses were not individual shots, but flowed from his wand as he moved almost in a dance. His chanting and casting were a seamless flow, curses, charms, and elemental effects alternated, forcing Sirius to alternate between blocking and dodging. The power of the spells was frightening, but the pace was 100 times more terrifying. Normal wizard would be out of power within less than a minute of casting at that power, yet the stranger showed no hint of stopping. Likewise, the spells flowed, each wand motion leading into the next, each body motion of casting blending into the dodge. This was the work of a master duelist. Sirius had only known 3 people to move like that. James was dead, Flitwick was 3 feet high, and that left. "Dulohov, you murdering bastard, this time you die," Sirius shouted and went into full attack mode. Antonin Dulohov had been Voldemort's pet duelist. He had killed a number of Sirius friends back in the last war, and killed a few more while Sirius was in prison in totally legal duels where he served as a wand for hire. "Black, just about out of friends, aren't you? Potter's dead, Pettigrew's dead, just the werewolf left. Maybe I'll gut him and leave you stunned so you can wake up wrapped in his intestines. Wouldn't that be sweet?" Dulohov laughed, not fearing Sirius. Their spells lit up the night, and Dulohov's smirk died as he realized Sirius was casting faster and hitting harder than he ever had before. Worse, the bastard wasn't even paying attention to just Dulohov. Sirius moved not like a duelist at all. He stalked forward like some great predator. His spells at Dulohov required all of Dulohov's attention, but every once in a while he would conjure or transfigure a shield to ward the witch to his rear or the werewolf to his flank. It was like he could see the whole of the battle without losing concentration on the duel. Serpent Sorcerer. Dulohov began adding conjured snakes to his chains of curses and charms, hoping that Sirius would miss or ignore at least one, giving the snake a chance to strike Sirius or one of his allies and break the bastard's rhythm. Dulohov smiled now. He had cast it 6 times, and Sirius had ignored all of them. Azkaban had cut his situational awareness. Dulohov was ready to strike the second the serpents distracted Black. The marauders died tonight, a fitting welcome for the Dark Lord on his return. "Antonin, did I tell you the good news?" Sirius said as he dove to the ground to miss the Cruciatus curse Antonin put between Stunner and Lightning Bolt. "What is that?" Antonin Dulohov said, beginning to cast his most powerful Bombarda Maxima to stun all 3 when Black got hit by the first snake and dropped that too powerful protego. "I'm a Parselmoth. Sick boys," Sirius hissed, and Antonin had 1 second to connect the hissing he heard at the beginning of the fight with his Dark Lord's own parcel tongue before the first of the 6 snakes bit him. Dulohov tried to activate his portkey in his mask. If he wasn't all the way dead, his house elf would potion him to healthy enough to summon aid. That would be when he felt Sirius Black hit him with the first spell. Finite incantum, Sirius said coldly, the magical blast of disruption stopping the portkey function of his mask. The mask was protected against the summoning charm Akio, of course, but no one bothered to protect it from the weak and slow first-year levitation charm. Wingardium Leviosa, Sirius chanted happily. Dulahov had time to see his mask, his portkey, his chance of survival rise into the air, before all he saw was flashing fangs and pain. Narcissa had taken advantage of the duel to nail one of the Death Eaters with a nasty curse that turned his skin into ants that would try to devour the rest of his flesh. As a killing curse, it was pathetically weak, but it was impossible to concentrate on casting spells or activating magic items when your skin turned to bugs and began biting you. The Black family magic was not for duels, it was for killing. Her next spell was a simple transfiguration. Muggle studies was not a waste, it was just misused. Air is mostly nitrogen, and was only 21% oxygen, but that is the bit required to breathe. The bubblehead charm replaced the oxygen, as did a number of other spells. She would not waste her time trying to remove the oxygen, since the Death Eater mask would replace it. However, turning the nitrogen into phosphorus caused the air around the Death Eater to enjoy what the Muggles called a fuel air explosion. Magical fire would have devoured the corpse, but Muggle phosphorus still would burn at least the first few inches. It would just take a while. Well, the man did want to become a Death Eater. This death was just a little chewier than most. Narcissa smiled, then reached down to the Irish minister, Sean Laverty. Good day, Minister Laverty. I am sorry that British hospitality has not been all that had been promised. Be assured House Black is working to correct that matter now. The minister, along with his two living auras, got to their feet as Sirius and Remus finished the two Death Eaters who stayed to fight, unable to stop the remainder who turned to black fog and retreated. Lady Malfoy, were those Death Eaters actual Death Eaters? The minister said, voice shaking in fear. At that point, a voice in the distance called out Morsemorder, and a green skull took shape in the sky. A long green snake flowed out of it. Narcissa smiled. Yes, those were actual Death Eaters. Like my former husband, I am rather pleased to announce both my own divorce and that my son Draco has both taken House Malfoy and cast my Death Eater ex-husband, Lucius No Name, from it. The minister looked too stunned, but the female aura muttered a soft congratulations. Narcissa smiled happily. I am rather pleased. Sirius stalked back, his killing of Dulohov having only partially slaked his thirst for revenge. I wished I would never see another of those bloody things. Sirius muttered only to see a group of auras, and no less a figure than Cornelius Fudge, Minister of Magic Chargin, a day late and galleon short as always. Fudge was in a rage. He stuck his wand in Sirius' face and screamed at him. Did you do this? Did you cast that mark? I will see you in Azkaban for this. Fudge screamed at Sirius. Minister Sean Laverty had regained enough composure to lose it at that point. He got in Fudge's face and screamed back. Did he do what? Cast the dark mark. No, you English imbecile. He was busy trying to save me from Death Eaters, several of which he killed. Is this the safety the British ministry promised us? Is this the international cooperation you talk so much about? One group of British wizards actually steps between us and Death Eaters to defend us, and you want to send them to Azkaban. The Irish minister was shouting back at Fudge, and the politician was backtracking, his secure ground in attacking Black turning to a swamp beneath his feet. This man was released from Azkaban improperly. He cannot be trusted, shouted Fudge desperately. Sirius sneered. As opposed to Dulohov, who I killed over there in Death Eater mask having a go at the Irish minister, he was officially cleared of being a Death Eater after a sizable donation to somebody's campaign. Clearly that has worked out well for everybody. At that point, a very angry young man came up and raised his wand to the sky. Expecto Patronum. The boy screamed, and a silver basilisk the size of a small dragon soared into the air, its glowing silver radiance banishing fear and hopelessness as its light banished the darkness. The glowing silver basilisk opened its mouth wide and chomped down on the dark mark where it held in the sky and shattered it. Instantly, the popping of apparition sounded, and dozens of auras appeared, including Rufus Scrimgeour, Alastair Moody, and one very angry-looking Albus Dumbledore. It was hours of screaming before what passed for an investigation concluded. A handful of people ended up in the building the Auras had commandeered for their headquarters. In saner times, it was a dining hall for the campground. The Bulgarian, British, and Irish ministers of magic sat in a row. Albus Dumbledore, as head of the Iqua, had taken the chair of the council, even though it should have been Cornelius Fudge as host. Gathered were the entire Black Party, Rufus Scrimgeour, Chief Aura, and Alistair Moody, former Chief Aura, and Amelia Bones, current head of the DMLE. There are hundreds dead. This is a disaster, and you people are a part of it, snarled Cornelius Fudge, pointing at Sirius Black angrily. The Bulgarian minister grunted, and in perfect English that would shock both Crouch and Bagman, who were under the impression he spoke nothing but Bulgarian. The Bulgarian minister began speaking in the slow, deliberate way that had voters hanging off his every word. I think, if it were not for the children you are trying to punish, there would be several hundred more dead, and at least 60 of them would be children of my country. In Bulgaria, we would be talking about medals, scholarships, and after-school mentorships to offer such promising, daring, and caring young witches and wizards. He rumbled seriously. Fudge was spitting as he answered, his rage too great to control. Caring, caring. These children killed dozens of men, some in ways that experienced auras were sick from seeing. Alistair Moody laughed. Death Eaters, Minister Fudge. Not men. Death Eaters. Didn't make me sick. Gave me a serious hankering for some kebabs, but not sick at all. Rufus Scrimgeour cut in. You are not an aura anymore, Moody. You forget this is a nation of laws. We do not kill people, we arrest them, try them, and only if they are found guilty do we punish them. Sirius Black snorted. Pull the other one, mate. You tossed me in Azkaban without a trial, without even a charge, then put a kiss on sight order on me when it was revealed the guy I went to jail for murdering didn't even die. You ordered the Dementors to suck my soul and kill me beyond even the promise of rebirth, rather than admit you ignore your own laws whenever there is some political gain to be had. Besides, you are allowed to use lethal force in defense of yourself and others. That is part of the basic law of the Wizigamot and part of the Iqua Charter. The Death Eaters came to kill, and we killed them for it. Dumbledore tapped his wand to the table, and the boom shook all of them to their bones. He put on his most kindly godfather face and leaned forward, speaking softly. Sirius, your influence on these children is a concern. I come to see to the safety of the boy who lived and find him covered in blood, so much blood I cannot even make out the color of his clothes. And what does he say? He grins and boasts that he cut the rings off their fingers, pouches off their belt, and golden teeth from their jaws after he killed them. Harry raised his hand. Point of order. Noodle killed almost half of them, but since he doesn't have a pouch, and I provide for him anyway, he let me keep his loot with mine. Looting your kill is a basic goblin right under the Treaty of Gringotts 1474, and as my familiar under wizarding law, that right extends to Noodle. The Irish minister shuddered, but the Bulgarian slapped his knee and shouted something to Sirius in Bulgarian. Sirius leaned over and translated. The minister says you have big hairy ones a lion couldn't carry. It's a very good Bulgarian compliment. Dumbledore winced. Killing is always wrong. If we do not give our enemies a second chance, a chance to admit they were wrong and to become a better person, we are no better than Voldemort. Alistair Moody snorted. That was what you told the old Order of the Phoenix last war. I think half the living members are in this room. I could count the dead, but I don't have toes on the one side, so taking my boots off won't do it. At least 10 of them that I can remember got killed by people we had arrested and thrown in prison. In Dulohov's case, twice. The only reason we didn't lose the bloody war the last time is because Voldemort tried to kill young Harry here as a baby and got his ass handed to him. It was only killing that stopped him then. It won't be second chances and stunners that win it this time either. Cornelius Fudge snarled at him. You are no longer an aura. You are a brutal thug who was tolerated by past administrations out of a misguided sense of gratitude for the last war. You have no right to speak here. Narcissa smiled her slow Slytherin smile and offered quietly. And you will not be Minister of Magic in a week. You have failed to provide security for our own witches and wizards. You have failed to provide security for our guests. And you have attempted to punish those witches and wizards. even the children who dared to step up and save the lives of those the Death Eaters came to kill. How many families of the Wizagamot almost lost family today? How many of their daughters and sons only live to come home because of the people you are shouting at now? I really feel your voting block melting like that fellow Sirius liquefied. Cornelius Fudge shouted back. A half-dozen lords of the Wizagamot lie dead in the field, some killed by your precious children. Sirius shrugged. Even less votes for you. Sissy is right. Your time in office won't outlast the cleanup of this event. It's been a long day, and the kids and I need to get back to the tent. Sirius and the others rose. Alistair tossed something onto the table in front of Dumbledore. It looked like a badge. He stumped over to Sirius and put a hand on his shoulder. Mind if I join you, lad? I would love to hear how the night went in more detail. Since the Ministry doesn't want me, and the Order doesn't like my methods, I find myself looking for a more rational group to stand with. Alistair, Mad-Eye, Moody said as he stumped along beside Sirius. Dumbledore watched him go with a look of quiet rage in his eyes, before the blank and somewhat soft mask of the kindly grandfather slid back down.